When you walk into someone's home, you will always take your shoes off, no matter what. They don't have carpets; they all have hardwood floors. But it is, if you wear your shoes inside the home, it's very disrespectful. I ended up getting zip-on boots because you go into the home, zip them off, you take everything off, you put it on like the racks and everything, and they're very nice. They'll come take it off for you or help you, assist you, and that kind of stuff. But you want to make sure you're on top of that and you don't be disrespectful, because they will not tell you you're being disrespectful, and Finns are too nice to do that. And so you take off your shoes, take off your clothing, like your outer clothing, not your clothing. Finnish food, it's honestly, it's very good. There's a lot of dairy, so people love milk, and it's the best milk you'll ever have. A wide variety of cheeses of all sorts, and so you have tons of cheeses. You also have just huge dairy, like tons of yogurts, everything. It's just delicious. At the same time, a lot of food is many different soups with hot dogs or sausages, I guess is a translated word. It's called a makara. But anyway, pretty much it's just the basic potatoes, meat, brown sauces, and all this kind of stuff. There's spices. They don't use any spices. I mean, nothing spicy. They will use like for Christmas dishes and that kind of stuff. For instance, to name like some basic foods you might be eating every day. Very common thing is naki keito, which is just it's like basically it's like a sausage soup. Very common. It's just very great stuff they make. It's just everything's homemade and very few processed goods. And so, for instance, if you're buying fruit or vegetables, you need to eat them quickly because they don't last long, because they're very fresh and very delicious. And at the same time, they're not processed or any I don't have like any additives, and so they will not be They don't have a long shelf life. The bakery goods are delicious. I'm sure if we had, they're pretty fattening, I'm sure, but very good bakery goods. All sorts of delicious bread like pulla, which we don't have in America. It's a rich, thick bread. Very good though, very common. You'll have very often a wide variety of berries. Because it's a swampy kind of place. Not like swampy, dirty, just a lot of lakes, no mountains, and so, because of all the lakes, it's very moist and it rains a lot, and so they have you'll ride your bike down paths all the time, and you'll find just strawberries, raspberries, blueberries just growing out all over the place. And so you'll have many wide varieties of jams, and that's honestly one of the big things, is you'll have jam with your meat, with a lot of things, and so it's delicious. I love it. I love jam. At the same time, very common thing you'll have for lunch almost every day is probably open-ended sandwiches, which is just it's a slice of you call it ruisleipä, which is just rye bread. They don't have white bread. They rarely really use white bread. It's very healthy whole wheat or it's rye bread, and you'll just have with your meat on there, with your cheese. Of course, you're gonna put the butter on. They love their butter, and it's very plain food, but it's very good because it's just so fresh and everything's homemade. Mammi is something to eat during Easter, which is just, you could say, blended rye bread, and they turn it into it almost looks like they put it onto like a platter, almost like a little pan or something, and they cook it. It doesn't taste good. They don't even like how it tastes, but they put a lot of cream with it. It's just a tradition. They eat it, and so you eat that once a year for Easter. And then Christmas, you'll have casseroles like crazy. My favorite dish in Finland is liver casserole. Sounds gross, but it's really good. I love liver casserole. They're so great at making liver. You go to restaurants, order liver. It's very good. And so liver casserole is pretty cheap. I would get it all the time. Carrot casserole, potato casserole. Then you have other ones of certain things that we don't have in America. They have delicious juices of wide varieties, and the snacks, everything is good. I didn't taste anything that was gross besides the traditional food that they eat That's gross on purpose, at least in my opinion. And then you have porridge and that kind of stuff too. So everything is just great. You don't have to worry about anything, and you'll eat plenty of fish. I forgot that. Salmon. I love salmon. It's so good. Salmon, halibut, and some other fish dishes. Holidays. Christmas is the biggest thing in Finland. There's 3 days of Christmas. There's Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and then the day after Christmas. And so they're all holidays. They open their presents the evening of Christmas Eve. There's no shops open. They love Christmas. Santa Claus, like, you don't know that. I mean, I didn't know this growing up in America, but Santa Claus lives in Finland. I don't know if you knew that, but he lives in the North Pole, the Arctic Circle. There's Santa's village. It's an actual village you can visit if you're up in the north. I saw many pictures, and it was beautiful. But yeah, Santa's up there with his elves and everything, and it's the biggest thing. Christmas, everyone has a Santa Claus come to their home, give the presents, and during Christmas, they, as far as food, they eat the casseroles or different kinds of meats. But it's not like in America how we'll have tons of lights and like this huge thing. It's more of a mellow, relaxing kind of time. Everyone will go to church on Christmas Day. It's the number one place for mothers in particular, and that's because so first off, they have a very high appreciation for women in Finland, and they have, I mean, there's no like discrimination really. I think the current president is actually a woman right now, and so, or like the last president was, I can't remember, but they had a woman president recently. Such a small amount of crime. It is like that. People are so honest and trustworthy. You leave your bike out unlocked for days, and no one will take it. Like if you lose a scarf or something, or like a glove or a nice hat or anything, people will hang it up on a tree near where they found it on the ground instead of taking it. So people like are very honest, and they just don't like they're just very loving in that kind of way. And so it's such a very safe place. You don't have to worry about anything except for like being cold. Like besides that, it's just like there's no crazy bugs. Like you'll have mosquitoes during the winter time. During the summertime. And honestly, there's nothing else to really worry about. And so, but yeah, it's just a very safe place. Very clean, extremely clean. You'll learn how to recycle like crazy. There's nothing to worry about in Finland. As far as it goes, if you have any worries, there's nothing to worry about. I mean, it's cold, but that's not even that big of a problem. Like, you get over cold pretty easily. But, like, I mean, you might go to places in the world where you're worried about being out late and someone's gonna rob you or something, but you don't have to worry about that in Finland. No one's ever gonna do that. I mean, maybe you might have like a drunk guy that's a little scary on the street, but that's about it. So, people are very traditional. They have, honestly, and they're very ordered, and generally very ordered, and have like a set of rules or things they live by and they do that they have always been doing. Finns, they don't have good feelings towards Russia just because of World War II with the Nazis and everything. Finns are actually, I guess they agreed with the Nazis so they wouldn't get conquered to do shipbuilding and other kind of stuff, and also like supply them with certain things so they wouldn't be conquered and like by the Nazis. And so, but then at some point during the war, Russia just was like, okay, whatever. And so Russia actually, the Nazis didn't, but Russia decided to attack Finland. You ask Finns and they love telling you all about this because it's honestly a huge part of Finnish culture. I mean, the Finns population is about, now it's 5.4 million, but at that time, I don't even know, it's probably like 4 million or maybe less. And Finns are very spread out as far as the cities. You'll have a city and then like nothing forever than a city. So people are living very far away from each other. But anyway, a smaller population, you have this huge, you have Russia come attack Finland on the eastern border. And so they call it the Winter War, and it's just a war where Finland held off Russia. the temperature at that time, it was one of the coldest winters, and it was about negative 42 degrees Celsius or something. Very cold. I think it got colder. I could be wrong, but it was extremely it was freezing cold, and so. And the Finns pride themselves being able to outdo Russia with the weather and everything. And so, but anyway, yeah, so the Russians attacked Finland, and Finland held them off, pushed them back, but they ended up losing an area of Finland, a large area, you could say, a nice little sliver on the side, and they call it Karelia, is what it's called in English. And so, and you'll learn all about the culture with the the Karelians and what about them and that kind of stuff as you're in Finland, what makes them unique, and as far as language wise, and there's a lot of things of that. But anyway, so they were conquered. So that part of Finland was taken, and so they don't have good feelings towards Russians. They have a very strong political view. They're very, you could say they're liberal in their thinking as far as it goes, politically wise. So they have high taxes. I think it's about 42% tax, and I think it also depends on your income. Very high taxes, but medicine is free, and so and that's so anything like that, you go to the hospital, it's all free. It isn't very high quality, but it is throughout Europe, it's one of the higher quality medical places. But since it's free, they don't pay doctors or those kind of people. I'm a pre-med student, so I studied this a lot when I was there, but they don't pay very high for those kind of professions, and so not many people go into it, and so then it's not the highest quality, but it's free, and so that's why people love it, and it's good enough quality for where they are. The common thing to do is you always handshake and a nod, not like a full body, a nod, and they usually will tell you, you always say your name. Sometimes they'll say the last name, then first name, or just your first name. It's very common, and that's how you learn people's names. And you need to remember their names. It's obviously in any kind of culture, it's sort of rude to forget their name. In America, we always ask people their names, forget 2 seconds later, and so that's what I do. And so that's one thing as far as etiquette, you could say. One random thing about eating: fork in the left hand, knife in the right, and you keep it like that the whole time. In America, we do it a little differently. You usually cut it with the right hand, and then you place the knife down, put the fork in the right, and then you eat it. In Finland, it's way different. You very, very rarely will you eat anything with your hands. It's dirty. And so any kind of time you have a meal, there's always a main course, and always, no matter what time of day, there's always a dessert afterwards. Whether it be a fruit bowl or some sort of ice cream, they'll always provide a dessert. If there's 5 or more people though at the table, I need to wait to eat a dessert. You gotta wait to eat it until everyone receives their serving, and then you can pick up your spoon and start eating. If there's less than 5 people, you can feel free to eat whenever you want. And when you receive your food, whenever you receive your food, you're allowed to start chowing down immediately. But if there's more than 5 people, for the dessert, this is the rule for the dessert, not the main course. But when there's more than 5 people, then you need to be waiting. And so you'll notice the kids are very well educated with etiquette, because when they get their dessert, they're sitting there waiting for everyone else to get it, and you gotta do the same thing. Because they're not gonna tell you to do it, but you need to do it. Finns are too nice to tell you to do it, but they will love to see that you understand their culture by doing that. So Finnish, people will tell you, it's everyone always says the hardest language to learn in the world or something like that. And so but it is one of the harder, I think it's top 5 if you look on the internet or something. It is a very difficult language. It's not too difficult as far as reading. Pronunciation, pronouncing it perfectly is difficult, but what makes it hard is the grammar. It's just very complex and in depth, and so and it's hard to just say that and have you understand what that means. As an example, cases, every language, even English sort of has cases. They're just sort of endings that you add onto a word to indicate different kind of things. And so, for instance, Finnish will have a word like the word mäki, which is the word for hill. And so mäki, and then what happens is you change the word to a stem, which we don't have in English. I think Spanish might have stems, but you change. So the word so you have mäki, and then the stem is mäke. And then what you do is you put a case. So you have about 16 daily use cases, but then you have you have a bunch of other endings that you can call cases. There's a total of 84 of these. You could technically call them cases, like the nut case or minen or different kind of things, which bring meaning to words and change them. But as far as, you will need to understand a lot of those. And so if you want to be speaking with people. And so that's why I make it difficult, because the beginning of a word will sound the same, but then the ending of the word is what really the meaning of everything comes from. For instance, the word mäki, you have the stem mäke, and then if you want to say you're going to the hill, it's mäle. And so that means it's one word, just meaning to the hill. If you want to come from the inside of the hill, like you're coming out of the hill, it's mästä. If you want to come from the top of the hill, it's mältä. And there's other, you go on forever about it, but so it's very complex and ordered, and that sort of reflects on the culture of the people. They're very complex and ordered people. And so, but so as far as Finland goes, their culture, so Finnish culture sort of stems from a West and Eastern kind of thing. And so from the West, you have a lot of influences from Sweden, and there are some American influences and all that kind of stuff. And also, you should look at the people. They have a lot of people with blonde hair and blue eyes. But from the eastern part, you'll have from northern Russia. They call them the Sami, we might call them Eskimo, or those kind of people up there. They're not really too sure where Finns really come from, but from the eastern side, you'll have more of a brown hair, brown eyes kind of thing, and it sort of mixes. And so Finnish people, you'll see blonde hair, blue eyes, you'll see brown hair, and those kind of mixtures. Women are usually shorter, men are usually, average height of a male, as you see in America, probably about 5'10", and the women are generally shorter. And so, but you'll get so throughout time you got this mix, and now you have this random language that no one really knows where it came from. It is a Finno-Ugric language, which is like a Finnish-Hungarian kind of mixture. No one really even knows where it comes from, to be honest. So that's why it's so complex, and it has no relation to any language except for Estonian. From the east, you'll have dialects called Savo, and so Savo is just a dialect. They'll use different words, or they'll speak things a little differently, and it's hard. You'll just be they're speaking Finnish, but I don't know what they're saying. And that's what sort of will happen if people that are speaking Savo, which is a dialect of Finnish. And so, but on the west side, you get Turku. You get some the Western influences. You'll speak a lot of you'll have Swedish come into the Finnish language. Then you have places like Rauma and other places where they have crazy dialects where you cannot even really understand someone that's speaking that kind of dialect, but they will end up saying words pretty different and cut off endings, and so it gets a little. If you meet people that are 50 years or of the age 50 or older, they will be speaking those dialects more purely than people that of a younger age. Usually people of a younger age will just speak Finnish, just like how it is supposed to be, with a lot of slang. And so people speak spoken Finnish. And so that's what also makes Finnish hard, is what you're learning is not necessarily what is spoken. And so it is the same language. It's not a different language. It's just a chopped language. For instance, the word for I is minä, but the word for I in the spoken is mä. And so they just sort of cut everything. Like you say you like something, minä tykkään tästä, you say tykkään tästä. And it's it's just a lot shorter. And so you won't catch that when you first get to Finland, but when you learn, you'll be okay, wait, they're saying I like that, but they're not really speaking it how they should, but it's normal for them. And so that's why it's hard. Well, one reason why it's hard. So you get all those culture mixes and dialects. When you get transferred to other cities, you'll be like, wait, I can't understand very well anymore. And then you got to learn that dialect, or like understand that some people are going to say different like common words, and they'll mix them up a little different, make it different, and you got to learn that. And so that's what makes Finnish very difficult. Is the dialects are actually, they're very geographical and very specific. And so, but you'll understand when you get there.
Everyone told me two things. One, that the language was really hard, and two, that it was going to be really cold and snowy all the time. Well, when I went to Finland, all the snow was melted, and I was just getting in there when it was springtime. And then summer came, and summer is the most beautiful time in Finland. For one, it's green. Everything is so green. And most of Finland is forest. You will walk through all of these beautiful wooded areas, and lakes and streams and rivers just pop out of nowhere. You're literally walking through a magic fairyland, I felt like. And if you've ever seen the movie Lord of the Rings, picture an elf forest, and that's Finland. One thing that really surprised me was in the summertime, there's bushes that just surround the forest path that are loaded with blueberries and raspberries and strawberries, and they just grow there, and you can eat as much as you want. And so my companions and I, we would literally just take a couple minutes in our walks to wherever we were going, and we would pick berries and just eat them as little snacks, and it was so much fun. Another thing that really surprised me about Finland is their love of mushrooms. Finns love mushrooms. Not all Finns, but a lot of them. And when I left, I don't really like mushrooms, but I like Finnish mushrooms. And they make delicious casseroles and different meals with mushrooms that they pick themselves. They'll go out to the woods and just pick mushrooms, and they're delicious. And it's a popular hobby in Finland to go mushroom picking and also berry picking. They'll pick berries all summer, and then they'll store them for the whole year and use them for jam and ice cream toppers. Finns love ice cream, and Finnish ice cream is super delicious. But that was the biggest thing that surprised me, was how green it is and how beautiful it is. The Finnish food is kind of like the Finnish people. Finnish people are very simple in what they do, and their food is pretty simple and pretty basic, meaning they like to eat potatoes and different types of meat and sauce over potatoes and things like that. They're generally pretty healthy eaters, meaning they do eat lots of vegetables and things, but for the most part, their food is pretty simple. The biggest thing that I really liked about Finnish food and Finnish cuisine is their pastries called pulla. And it's a Finnish type of sweet roll. And there's actually different versions of pulla, and some have cream cheese in the middle, some have fruit inside, some have raisins and nuts inside, but they're all so delicious. You just have to limit how much you eat. But pulla is really good. And they also have they look like little rice cakes. They're called riisipiirakka. It's basically a rye bread type of shell, and then you have a rice porridge inside. Sometimes it'll be rice, sometimes it'll be potatoes, and sometimes it'll be sweet potatoes. But it's with the rye bread, and then you bake it, and you can put butter or egg or cucumber or ham on top, and it's like a little sandwich, and it's really good. It's a really good meal when you're in a hurry. With transportation, we usually used public transport, such as buses, trains, railway cars. Especially in Helsinki, we used a lot of different types of trains, whether it was the metro or the railway car or the commuter train to the greater Helsinki area. In Finland, they have certain days where the flag, where they fly the flag, the national flag. It's not every single day, and every day has a certain significance and importance of why the flag is up. The Finns love just talking about the weather, and it's fun just to get their opinion on it. In Finland, a lot of people live in apartments, so they don't have a lot of room or belongings such as maybe we do here in the States. If they live in an apartment, they will have one main room and then a bedroom, usually, and maybe another room for a kitchen. But sometimes the kitchen is in the main room. And so they don't have a whole lot of space. And so they use their space, what they have, really well. And they'll have bookshelves and just appliances that will keep their space tidy. They're, for the most part, pretty organized and tidy people. But of course, there are exceptions, like in every culture. If they do live in a house, then it's still a pretty small house compared to sometimes what we see in the States, that they have a few rooms, and generally the houses are very different in style. And so sometimes they're really bright colors, so that when it snows, that not everything is so cold and dark, but that they have some type of cheerful color around them. But they're typically still really small houses. They don't really like a whole lot of space. They kind of like their belongings to themselves, and then that's how they live. I love the Finnish people. They are so genuine and so friendly. At first, they might seem hard to get across because with their culture, they have a type of outer shell in the sense that they aren't like us Americans where we will just go up and talk to anyone and everyone about anything. And in Finland, they more stay to themselves. And they have lots of close friends, but they won't go out of their way to meet someone new. It depends on the Finn, but that's generally what happens. On transportation, we would just sit next to people we didn't know, and we would just talk with them. And at first, it was really pretty awkward because you're talking to someone that doesn't really necessarily want to talk with you. But once you just get them going and ask simple questions such as why they like their job, what they're studying if they're in school, what they like to do, simple questions to get to know them, and they start to open up, then as they open up and you open up about yourself and you tell your own experiences about your family or why you love Finland, then you'll be able to make a connection with them and you will become really good friends. And that's what I love about the Finns, is because at first they seem that they don't appreciate what you're trying to tell them, and they might seem a little bit cold in some sense, but they're not. They're the most trustworthy people I know. And when they let you in, you're in for a long time. And they will trust you, and you can trust them with anything. That's one of the main reasons why I love the Finns, is just because they're so trustworthy and loyal. Another reason is they love to help people. I remember we would get lost so many times because just maps in general, sometimes we just didn't know which street we were supposed to take or what was going on. And people that we didn't know, random people, sometimes they would be running. Sometimes they would just be walking on the street. Sometimes they would be on bikes. They would stop and they would ask if we needed help. And in America, not a lot of people do that. We kind of just go our own way. But in Finns, they're really observant people. And they notice if someone needs help. We always appreciated when they did that. Finns are really polite people. And so when they offer you food and when they offer you things, it is very cultural that you take it and that you really appreciate it. And if you don't show appreciation for it, it's a little rude in the eyes of Finns. Another thing is at nighttime, especially around 8 o'clock, after that, a lot of people consider it rude to knock on doors. So the Finnish language, you've probably heard that it's the hardest language, and maybe you've heard that. Well, don't believe it entirely. It is difficult to learn because it is a foreign language, and there are different things associated with the language, such as the vowels are differently pronounced than in English. But it's not impossible to learn. It's definitely possible. It was definitely difficult to learn because it was so new to me. I studied French for probably about 4 to 5 years, and then I got called to Finland. And I didn't know what to think about. I thought I was going to go French speaking, but I went Finnish. But I'm so glad I did, because it was the most treasured experience I've had. The reason maybe it's why people think it's hard is because each word can change in many, many different ways. And it just depends on what you're trying to say and where you want your sentence to go. You just have to put in the time, and the Finns are so helpful. It's the best way to talk with anyone on the trains, on the buses, even on the street, just asking people language questions. It was my favorite way to just approach someone and say, hey, how would you say this? And you can even say it in English. And all the Finns know English really well. But when you try to speak their language, their connection with you deepens. And they realize that they can trust you because you are putting yourself out there. And you are trying to learn their language, which they recognize as that it is a difficult thing to do, and they appreciate it a lot more.
So that means like my grandmother gave birth to my mother and my mother gave birth to me, but I think munia is like to lay eggs or something. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but so winter, -36 below zero, out on a bike in the north of Finland. I had tears freeze to my cheeks. My eye froze shut one time, and it was pretty intense. So like I was riding a bike, and the sun was out. I mean, it's kind of interesting. The sun was out, and I was just like closing my eye because the sun was, and like we're riding down a hill, and like my eyes watering because it's so cold, and just like my eyelashes froze together. And so I was kind of like this and riding my bike, and I was like trying to open up my eye again, and it didn't work. And I finally got down to like this little area where we usually stashed our bikes to go contacting, and we went into the mall, just this little like shopping center, and I was just like, and I didn't want to pull out my eyelashes, and it was just kind of extreme. That was probably the coldest it had ever been, and it was cold. I could go on this for days. I love Finnish food. It was really great. I think it maybe takes a little bit of getting used to in the beginning. I know that their dairy is a little bit rich, but it's so good. Like, the yogurts and the ice cream is just like, it's something else out there. And I think too, pretty much every meal that we had, especially for like dinner appointments, was some sort of meat with some sort of potatoes and then some sort of like sauce or gravy on top. So like it was great. I mean, we had like meatballs all the time, and then we had, like just like I said, some sort of meat with potatoes and gravy. So that was kind of, I felt like most of the entrees. But there's so many good foods out there. I mean, they've got these little like riisipuro, which is just like and karjan pierakka. Karjan pierakka is just like this little like pie that has like rice and like potatoes in it, and they just come and it's just so good. Like it's like this little like handheld pie that you can just take on the go, and you just eat them, and they're so delicious. And then I think another thing too is sinappi, which is the Finnish mustard. Let's just say that every time I go to Finland, or there's sometimes that we have to buy it online so we can get it here. All my family loves sinappi now, and all my friends do too. And whenever we're barbecuing or something, they're just like, do you have sinapi? Like, we need some sinapi. So you could definitely have to try the sinapi, which is the Finnish mustard. Even if you don't like mustard, try sinapi. It might turn you around to the mustard life. But it's just so good. And then like they've got some really good desserts as well. One of the things that I really liked is memmi. It's like molasses and like some like rye as well, and it's kind of mixed up. It looks black. It almost looks like a black pudding. But then you scoop it up, put it in a bowl, and then you put cream and sugar on top of it, and it's really good. And then they have salmiakki, which is salted black licorice, which I'll be honest takes a little bit of getting used to, but you just kind of suck on that for a little bit, and it's great. So the food overall was just amazing, and I just loved everything about it. Like I said, the dairy can be a little bit heavy, but it's so good. It's the best. It'll change your life for sure. Salmon soup is it's called lohikeito in Finnish, and it changed my life forever. I mean, it's the greatest soup I've ever had in my entire life, and it's kind of fun. It's like the one thing that I've really taken back with me, and I make it for my family, every so often, and just make it for friends sometimes. But it's just like salmon with like there's like usually some sort of like greens, like some green onion or something in there, and potatoes, and it's just in this like broth and like some cream that they add in as well. It's really good. So you definitely have to try the salmon soup, and yeah, you'll be hooked. They've got some really good sodas out there. Pommac, I think, is something you'd have to try as well. And the Dr. Pepper tastes a lot better out there. I don't know what the deal is, but definitely try some Pommac. The candies, I mean, you can just go and like the chocolate is really good, so you can go get some Fatser chocolate and just kind of experiment with which ones you like. You've got to buy a lot of different bars, but sooner or later you'll find that one. And my companion and I, we used to have in the middle of the winter when we were up in Rovaniemi, we used to have this thing that says 800 grams a day keeps depression away. So we ate a lot of chocolate, and when it's dark outside and it's cold, it's always nice to come back and have that bar of chocolate that you can kind of go and munch on. So I think just go to the candy store, go to the convenience stores there, and pick out some candies, find something that looks good. But yeah, any sort of the Fatser bars, you're not gonna regret buying. So it was a lot of chocolate. So we were walking and riding bikes a lot, so hopefully we burned some of it off, but not the most healthy experience. I'm going to talk about a city called Vasa, which is on the west coast of Finland. And I think it's just in an interesting area. Vasa is on the west, where there's a lot of Swedish influence in Finland, and so there's a lot of Swedish-speaking Finns, which kind of adds a little bit of a cool new culture to kind of the Finnish culture as well. In that area, there's also a town called Pietarsaari, which is just a little bit north of Vasa, which is almost exclusively Swedish-speaking. But in Vasa, I would say that there's probably about 70% that are native Finnish speakers, probably another 30% or so that are actually native Swedish speakers. But it's a town of about 50,000 people, and I served there for like 9 months, and it was just one of the greatest places that I'd ever been. And I, got in there, and it's this beautiful little town right on the west coast of Finland. So it's pretty humid in the summer, pretty warm as well. And then once it gets to the winter time, there's a nice breeze that comes off of the sea there that will freeze you right to the bones. So, but it's a wonderful place. As far as safety and everything, it's a really safe place. There's just a beautiful town square where you can go, and they always have like markets and people that are selling fruit and vegetables and things like that in the summertime. And shopping is also very accessible. In that town square, there's a large supermarket and a number of other things there. When I was there, we had a car, which is kind of nice because it is pretty spread out. There's that town center, but then there's a lot of more like suburb neighborhoods around the area as well. So it was nice to have a car there. But it was just a great place. Beautiful. The summer is not too hot, and it got to be about 70 to 80 degrees, and then the winter it was pretty cold. So, but with that breeze coming off too, it really made it feel a lot colder than it actually was. But it was a great experience and an awesome place to live. Obviously, with Finland having as much forest as they do, the paper industry is very big, and like forest cutting down the forest and making it into wood, and making all that into paper. There's a big industry around that part. But in Vasa, for example, I don't think there is too much of a, it's actually a pretty big college town. They've got a few universities there. So it was really fun because there's a lot of young people there. There's just a lot of Swedish influence there. Helsinki is a great place. I served there for about 4 months, and there are just so many cool places. I mean, you can always kind of go and explore the city, which is a lot of fun. It's probably it's the biggest city in Finland, which is, so there's a whole lot of things to do. There's the big town center, which is great because they have these little streetcars that you can take all over the city, which is very accessible, and so you can kind of just get on and get off whenever you need to. But it's really, the public transportation there is really great. As far as things to see, I mean, there's the Kauppatoori, which is like the big market, which is right next to the sea. You can go there and get just like some food, some really good Finnish food, also just some souvenirs. It's kind of a touristy place, but really cool place to be. And then there's a little island that you can go to called Suomenlinna, which is actually where we used to play like capture the flag and stuff, which is just a lot of fun. Like, it's a really cool old castle that they used to have out there. It's like a fortress, and they even have some old cannons that are still there. And it's a must see if you're going to go to Finland, to go out there and play around on Suomenlinna. And there's just a lot of cool history there as well. And the rest of Helsinki, I mean, it's just huge. There's a lot of cool parks that you can go and see, and just a lot of good shopping. But also, I think it's really cool to go up and to see kind of northern Helsinki and up to even into Vantaa, like where the airport is. There's just a lot of cool things, a lot of really cool history around there as well. They've got some great museums, as well as the old Olympic Stadium where they held the Olympics. And so you can kind of just go around there, walk around, and see the city, which is just an amazing place. Outside of Helsinki, there's a lot of and then outside of the big cities, everybody tries to own their own house, and they build them, and it's kind of different. They have their front doors in the backyards, so that's always takes a little bit of getting used to. But mostly in the big cities, and especially in Helsinki, everybody pretty much lives in big apartment buildings. So there's a large apartment living around there. Helsinki is very fast-paced, a lot more fast-paced than the country is. I guess that's not much of a shock. It's funny because you hear from the Northerners that the people in Helsinki are so mean and just very very city people, and then you kind of hear from the people in the South that, I mean, there's the people in the North are just so out of touch, and they're just not very, they're not very nice and stuff. So I think there's just kind of the different cultures from the North to the South. But I mean, overall, it just seems my experience is that everybody's really nice in the North and the South. So Finns are genuinely pretty nice people. In Helsinki, they speak stadi, which is it's like a slang of Finnish, Swedish, Russian, English. It's a mix mash of so many different languages, and it's so hard to understand. So if people speak a lot of stadi in Helsinki, it's just something that's unique about Helsinki is they really speak a lot of slang, and sometimes you're just I have no idea what he just said, and that's pretty normal. So, but for the most part, people are pretty nice, and they know that you're not from there. And I don't remember a whole lot of stadi, so I don't know how many examples I'll be able to give you, but one I remember is this guy was talking about his dad, and he was saying faja, and we're like, what is that? And it's usually isa or iska. It's more like the slang. They say iska or isi, but he was saying faja, and I think it's more of a Swedish way of saying it. And so it was just kind of one of those things that they just take a lot of the different languages and just kind of mix mash it together. They call the streetcars something different as well, but I can't remember that off the top of my head. So yeah, it's mostly spoken in Helsinki. There's not too much of a different accent as much as just they're just saying a lot of really off words that when they string it together too, you're kind of just I didn't understand a whole lot of any of that. And so I guess it just kind of throws you for a loop sometimes, especially when you're sitting in downtown Helsinki. But yeah, they just try to mix mash a lot of different languages in a lot of different ways, and then they just kind of use Finnish endings and Finnish grammar on some of those words. So it's just, I just remember it being very difficult to understand. I think the general feeling towards Finns is that they're generally really shy, which I guess is true. And I think that they're generally really shy, but when you get them talking, or when you open them up, they they're great people, and like, you know, they've got a good sense of humor, but also they, you know, if you need some help with the language, you can always just be like, hey, like I'm from America, like I'm trying to learn Finnish, and just like, how do you say this in Finnish, or just like how do you pronounce this word, or like, am I saying this correctly? And they're always really willing to help. You know, they look at you and they're just like, why on earth would anybody come to Finland and learn Finnish? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't really compute to them, and so they're always really curious on what you're doing there. And if I think they really respect what you're doing, and I think it just, you know, as much as you really accept and embrace their culture, they really like to open up a lot to you as well. The one thing that I can always go back to, though, is if you ever need a drink of water and you're knocking on a door, you know, they're always so kind. You know, sometimes they'll offer just like, hey, do you need water or anything? But if you ever ask them for anything, just like, hey, can I just get a glass of water? We've been out here all day. They're just like, oh yeah, like of course. So even if they're not interested in hearing your message, they're always there to give you a glass of water or something. And one time we were riding our bikes and it was like -25, and we were just freezing. We'd been on our bikes for way too long, and so we walked into just like a library to get warm for just a little bit, and the people there were just like, hey, are you okay? Like, you know, you look really cold, and we're just like, yeah, like we're fine. And but you know, just like they've got a genuine care, and they, you know, I think one of the things that I really like about their culture and just the people as well is that they know where they come from, and they're very, I guess, just like proud of their heritage. And I think that a lot of that comes back to they fought off the Russians in the Winter War, you know, in the late 30s and early 40s and that was just kind of a miraculous thing that, you know, they've defended their country against a huge army of Russians that were trying to invade. And you know, they talk about this thing called sisu, which is just like, doesn't really have a great translation, but it's, you know, something like guts, or just like fortitude, or, you know, like pride, of just like, you know, remembering kind of what you're doing and remembering where you're coming from, and just like push hard and always work hard, and, you know, have that sisu, that Suomen sisu of just like, you know, working hard and making sure that you're doing the right things. And I mean, I just loved it. And they're, like I said, they're just really genuinely very nice people and want to help out. I think there's a lot of cool traditions that they have. One of the things I really loved on like All Saints Day or Halloween, and then also on Christmas, they take candles and they go and light them by the graves of their ancestors. So you can go out there and walk around just a graveyard, and it's all lit up with these candles. And I think it's just a really cool opportunity that they have to go and to remember their history and to remember their heritage. But also it's a beautiful view for, you know, just to walk through there, and it's very, very cool. Another thing too on New Year's that they do is they heat up, like, I think it's tin on like a stove, and they give you like this little piece of tin, and you heat it up on the stove until it's like liquid, and then you throw it into a bucket, like a sauna bucket, like full of ice water. And so you heat it up and you throw it in, and then you're supposed to, you take it out and you hold it up and you put a light behind it, and then it's supposed to show you like what the next year is going to be like. So I think I only did it 1 year, but I think I had like, mine looked like a chicken, so I can't remember what we decided on that I was going to eat a lot of chicken, or that maybe I was a chicken. I'm not sure exactly, but it was just a lot of fun, and you can kind of just joke around. Christmas is always a really big deal as well, and it's amazing. I was actually able to, in Rovaniemi, the place where I served, they have a Santa Claus village, and every year on the 23rd, Santa Claus leaves for his journey around the world. And so obviously Santa Claus lives in this village in Rovaniemi, which many people don't know, but they do now. And so it was really cool because he just gets off on, you know, he just gets in his sled and just starts riding off and starts his journey around the world. And so Finns actually celebrate Big Christmas on Christmas Eve on the 24th. That's when they get all of their presents, and it's when they have like their big meals and stuff. And then on the 25th, it's just kind of another day to eat and just kind of eat the leftovers of whatever they had left from the day before. And as well, I think just like the sports and the games that they play, hockey's really big, but you also play sahtlu, which is like floorball. It's kind of like floor hockey. When you're a greenie, you kind of come out and you say things just because you're so used to English that it's hard to say some of the vowels in the right way. And so you'd say like, mina tiedän, että tämä kirkko on tota, and just like that that kind of hurts me to say it that way, but minä tiedän, että Jesus Kristus on minun vapahtaja. Yeah, I mean, just like the T's are, I think with newbies are very like they say them a lot, which in Finnish it's a little bit different. And so I can kind of just try my best Finnish accent, which is, no minä tiedän, että tämä kirkko on totta, ja minä tiedän, että mun vapahtaja elää. Ja tiedän, että tämä kirkko on totta. And just kind of just the T's, and I guess just some of the vowels that kind of maybe get lost a little bit. Just trying to transition from speaking English so much to then just hearing how Finns would say it, and but they're very monotone and as well. And so sometimes new missionaries will be like, "Minä tiedän, että tämä kirkko on totta," and it's just like, you know, they say it a lot more like, "Minä tiedän, että tämä kirkko on totta."
So we walked past one door that said, surveillance cameras in use, violators will be shot, or something like that. And I was like, I haven't seen a sign like that since I was in America. And my companion thought it was funny to just turn and like wave at the camera that we could obviously see, but we thought the camera was either fake or that the person was not really going to watch it. And we walked past that door. She smiled and waved. We walked past it and go to the other door, and we knock on that one, and we're waiting. And this first door cracks open, and I look over, and the first thing I see is a pistol. Just like poking out of the door, and then a face behind the pistol. And then the guy says in Finnish, "What are you doing?" And we were like, "Oh, we're just knocking on this door here." And he's like, "Nobody lives there." And we're like, "Oh, good info. We're gonna leave now." And he was like, "Okay, good." And then like brings the gun back in and like pulls his face back and shuts the door. And me and my companion looked at each other and we just, what just happened? We were teaching somebody once and he brought a friend. And the friend kept saying, asking us why we weren't wearing clothes all the way down to here and where were our habits. He thought that we were nuns. And so eventually it like took us a long time to figure that out. And so eventually I was like, "Hey, we're not nuns." And he goes, "Yes, you are nuns." Which was like funny enough, but it just kept getting like crazier and crazier. And I think the funniest moment of that was there was this bee. We were teaching outside and there was a bee that was floating around. And this guy kills the bee. Our friend that we're teaching says basically the equivalent of, "Oh, the bee went dead," in his broken Finnish. And then the first guy eats the bee, just puts it right in his mouth. And like we all lost it. We could not understand why he did that. And like what was the thought process? So he ate the bee and like we did not go back to talking about Jesus. We couldn't bring it back after that. He was not a Finn, I should clarify. I have one favorite story about Finnish history, and I don't know if I know all of the details, but I'm going to tell it anyway because it's my favorite. So Finland has been in a lot of wars. It was owned by Sweden for a very long time, then Russia, then got its independence in 1917, which means that Finland is a little bit over 100 years old. And one of my favorite stories is of a time when they were fighting for their independence against Russia. And at this time, the Russian army had more people in it than the population of Finland. That's what they were up against. And Russia was rapidly approaching the capital city, and it started to look like all was lost. The president of Finland got on the radio and did a nationwide broadcast. And he gave a speech kind of trying to rouse the Finnish. Sisu is a Finnish word that means like bravery, courage, having the right stuff. So he's trying to rouse the Finnish Sisu. And then my favorite part of the story, his wife gets on the radio to do her part of the speech. And what she asks them to do is to pray. as a country. And she says, everybody kneel down right now. We're going to say a prayer for our country. And I've spoken to people who were alive when this happened. One of them was in a grocery store listening to the radio announcement because they didn't own a radio. And she told me that everybody in the grocery store immediately knelt down and began to pray. People knelt in their homes. They got out of their cars. They knelt in the grocery store. They knelt wherever they were. And as a country, Finland asked God to deliver them. And the fascinating thing is that when you look at Finnish history, it was almost like that was a turning point in the war. After that happened, there started to be all of these crazy, off-the-wall miracle ideas, like sniping people while skiing and hiding bombers in roads so that the tanks would drive over them. They would detonate the bomb. Then the bomber would get up and walk away totally fine. All of these ideas that allowed them to, as a very small group of people, take on a very large army. And when they did that, eventually, Finland won, and they have their independence today. And the people that I know who were there in that moment when they prayed, because the president's wife, Kaisa, asked them to, attribute that to that moment. Those people that were there and said that prayer believe that God is the one who helped them win that war. One of my very favorite things about the Finnish culture and the Finnish people is that they are incredibly helpful. I noticed that if I were to go up to a Finnish person and ask them just for directions, instead of telling me where to go or walking with me a little bit, almost every time that Finnish person would walk me all the way to my destination, sometimes taking up to 20 minutes out of their day to help me get where I was trying to go. And a lot of people comment on how reserved and quiet Finns are, but they're doing that out of consideration. And if you need more help from them, if you need something else from them, they will give it to you. They're also very loyal. And so when you enter into a Finn's heart, you don't leave. It's just a part of them and a part of you now. For cultural do's and don'ts, I think, one, the shoes, taking them off when you come in. Do make sure that you take your shoes off. Do give people enough physical space. There is not a lot of people in Finland, and there's a very large landmass. So I think Finnish people have gotten used to the idea of we have room to not be right on top of each other all the time. And so if you respect that, you will get their trust a lot more. Because I find that if you are too physically close, or you, even emotionally, if you show too much intimacy with somebody really fast, it can throw them off and make them a little bit less ready to trust you. But that is different with every person, obviously, and it applies a lot more for the older generations. A lot of the younger generations of Finnish people have been in a more global social climate with social media. A lot of them watch a lot of American TV, and those things have made them more like Americans, or more like global citizens. And so with younger people, you can get away with a lot more. You can be a lot friendlier, you can get up closer, you can joke more, but don't be offended if they don't smile back at you when you smile at them in public. But do know that they are not mad, they're just quiet. If you are going to Finland, you should go to Turku. And maybe I'm a little bit biased. I'm a little bit obsessed with it. I lived there for 6 months. But it is the most incredible place in the world. It's a stunning city. It is just the right amount of busy and quiet. Where Helsinki is go, go, go all the time. Turku is you can enjoy being there. There's a river that runs right through the middle of the city, and these beautiful, stunning bridges that have chairs on them. At Christmas time, they have trees, Christmas trees all over them. In the spring, they covered the bridge with daffodils. And if you go to Turku, then you should go to Naantali. Maybe I shouldn't say that because right now it's the world's best kept secret, but it is absolutely stunning. If you go to Finland and you have the chance, if you have some Finnish friends, go to their mökki. It's like a lakeside cabin usually, and they're very central to the Finnish identity. Like almost everybody has a mökki. I even knew of one guy who didn't own a home. He was technically homeless. He would get money in Helsinki from like begging and collecting recycling, and then go and live in his mökki. So he had to do it like every other week because there was no way for him to make money out at the mökki, but he had to come into Helsinki to make money, but he was homeless, but he owned a mökki. So like very central to the Finnish identity. So if you get a chance, go to a mökki, enjoy, if it's summer, enjoy swimming and roasting makkara, which is like a type of Finnish sausage. Eat it with Finnish mustard, it's way good. And go sauna. I never got to sauna, but you should go sauna. I really love that Finnish people know how to appreciate quiet, and all of them make it a regular, I won't overgeneralize and say all, but almost everybody will make it a regular part of their day or their week or their schedule in some way to spend time in nature, usually alone. And that, I think, does a lot for an individual, but when you have an entire country doing that, there's this like inner stillness that comes from that. They have a very long history with a lot of having to fight to be who they are, but they've always done that with this stunning bravery that is overwhelming. And I think part of that comes from this time that they spend almost in meditation. I love Finnish food in general. I really like riisipiraka, which is like small rye crust rice pie. Lohikeito, which is, what is that in English? Salmon soup. It's like a cream-based soup with bits of salmon and potato and dill in it, and I've never met somebody who tried it and didn't like it. And like, it's the ultimate comfort food. And maybe it's just because like I have Scandinavian heritage, and that's what like my ancestry wants, but it's so good. There's a lot of really good desserts and candies. Fazer is a very influential chocolate company. Almost every chocolate product in the store will be Fazer, and they're all amazing. There's a type of bread called pulla that is like a braided sweet bread with cardamom in it. I'm actually going to make some tomorrow. It is really good, and like any form of it is amazing, because sometimes they'll make like cinnamon, they're not cinnamon rolls, but they're kind of like cinnamon rolls, and other stuff with it, and it's so good. Seriously, it's insane. A lot of the Christmas foods are kind of off the wall. I liked them, but not everybody does. So one of them is like a big loaf of bread with a whole fish baked in the middle. And a lot of people get kind of creeped out by that. Another one that is really popular at Christmas is a casserole that has like liver chopped up in it. Yet again, I liked it, but I didn't know it was liver when I ate it, so maybe that helped. My very first impression flying into Helsinki was like, oh, this looks like home. For two reasons. One, it looks kind of like Maryland, where I'm from. And two, it felt like I was coming home. It felt like a place for me. Some of the strangest first impressions was like the first time I went to a grocery store was surprisingly difficult. It like was an emotional experience for me because it was so different from what I was used to, and everything was in Finnish, which I was still learning to speak. How you buy produce is different. You have to like take the fruit, put it on the scale, press a button, get a sticker, put the sticker on the fruit. And like that is a simple task to me now, but when I first got there it was like, this is crazy town. It's incredibly beautiful. When I think about Finland and my memories there, everywhere is just beautiful. And I remember, especially in my first few weeks there, just walking around every day and being amazed that everywhere I was some kind of beautiful. Whether that was because I was in the middle of a forest or by the ocean Or even in the middle of Helsinki, there are trees and parks and amazing people. It's just an amazing place to be. There's like a very distinctive Finnish style that you'll start to notice as you go to people's homes. It's really cool. It's very maybe minimalist, but also very woodsy. And there will usually be a lot of, at least in every home, 1 or 2 traditional items. So there's these traditional wall rugs, I guess is the best way to describe it. And they're kind of abstract usually. And it's a very old Finnish tradition to make them. And a lot of people will have them hanging in their homes. You always take off your shoes when you go into a Finnish house. The people that were helping us adjust to Finland told us, like, even if the host says you can keep your shoes on, if their shoes are off, take your shoes off. The only times I didn't do that is if somebody's home was obviously not very well kept and they kept their shoes on. It was an indicator to me that it would be totally fine and not at all offensive if I kept my shoes on. When you're traveling in Finland, you can get anywhere by public transport. You can get from Helsinki to Rovaniemi on a train. And Rovaniemi is like one of the highest cities where people actually live. It's where Santa lives also, if you're interested in that. I miss the people. I miss the people that became my friends and then became my family there. They are some of the most amazing people that I have ever gotten the chance to meet. And I miss the forests. I miss that sense of complete peace and wonder that you can get in the Finnish forests. If you ever get a chance to go to the national forest, it's incredible. It's like walking through Lord of the Rings. Like, there's moss on these huge boulders, moss everywhere. It felt like the games of make-believe I used to play as a kid. I would pretend I was in some enchanted forest. And I got to Finland and I lived that reality. I got to Finland July 2018 and I left Finland October 2019, which means I had 1 winter and 2 summers. My first summer was the hottest Finnish summer on record, so that was fun. And then I was serving in Kerava at that time, which is a small town just outside of Helsinki. It is so lovely and so quaint. They do concerts in the middle of the town square on Saturdays in the summer, and there's flowers in all of the street lamps. Like, if you want to picture a perfect quiet town, it's Kerava. Then after that, I moved to Turku right around Christmas, and I stayed there from Christmas to Midsummers, which is another big holiday in Finland. So I was there for a while and had the snowiest winter that Turku has had in 100 years. So I went from the hottest summer to the snowiest winter. And then I moved back to Helsinki in Itäkeskus, so the east center of Helsinki. And I visited a couple other cities, but for the most part I was in Helsinki and Turku. Both of them are spectacular places to be. I liked the quieter side of Helsinki, but I like the quieter side of everything, I think. I like cities, I like bustle, but there's something enchanting to me about a place that knows how to take its time. And so I really liked Kerava for that, and I liked Turku for that. Almost everybody that met me that didn't know a lot about who we were and what we were doing would ask us about Donald Trump, all the time. And when we're there as missionaries, we don't talk about political things. And so we would always kind of just divert the conversation or say, we don't talk about that. We're here to talk about the Savior, that kind of thing. But, it was a question that was on the forefront of so many Finnish people's minds. Oh, that's an American. I wonder how they feel about Donald Trump. Christmas is a big deal. One of my favorite Christmas traditions is to go to a graveyard and light candles for the deceased. And when you go around Christmas to a graveyard, it's just filled with light. And it is so stunning. It was breathtaking. Because it was not just the light that was a beautiful thing, but the fact that these people were remembering and caring about their deceased loved ones and their ancestors that just took my breath away. There are a couple of holidays that we don't really celebrate here in the States that they celebrate pretty big. One of them is Vappu, or May Day. I don't really know how Vappu became a thing, but in order to celebrate it, it involves drinking drinking in general, but also in particular drinking this traditional Finnish lemonade type drink with like a really low alcohol content called sima. And everybody wears their graduation hats, and Finnish graduation hats look kind of like a sailor's cap. Like they're white with like a bill and a little gold thing. And on Vappu, everybody wears them. So it's just like a sea of graduation caps. And then the next holiday after that is Juhannus, or Midsummers. And you celebrate that just by barbecuing, going to your muki, generally enjoying the fact that it's summer, and that on Midsummers, that's the longest day of the year. So it's summer and you don't have to stop enjoying the fact that it's summer and the sun is out. And so much celebration happens because the sun is there, because in the winter you get 3 hours of sunlight and you learn to appreciate the sun in a totally different way. So after a Finnish winter, you come into summer and it's glorious, and it makes complete sense that they would have a holiday specifically to celebrate the longest day of the year. Finland is a really safe country. You don't have to worry too much about things getting stolen or getting mugged. Like, if you drop something on the street, even if it's really valuable, like your cell phone, it is significantly more likely that you will just find it placed somewhere where you might be able to find it later. They'll put it up on a post or something like that. They'll hang hats and scarves from trees if they find them on the ground. A recent study showed which countries would bring back stolen wallets, like lost wallets. If you dropped a wallet in a city, how often would it get back to the owner? And Finland had the highest return rate. It was only 1 out of the, I think, 13 wallets that they had intentionally lost in Helsinki that didn't make its way back. Obviously, still don't be stupid, but Finland is a really safe place to be. Your biggest danger is honestly ice and cold. And if you know how to take care of those things, then you'll be fine. Let me see if I can remember how to not speak Finnish properly. Tämä on minun huono morto. Oh gosh, I hate this. Terve, mitäs kuuluu? Olen Maren. Hauska tavata. Oh gosh, I hated that so much. That same sentence in better Finnish is Tämä on minun hyvä murto. Moi. En sanoisi terve, jos puhuin suomea oikeasti. Mitä kuuluu? Ennen kuin tulin tietämään, että tulisin Suomeen, se jännitti, että en tiennyt mihin menisin. Ja minulla oli tämä uni, eli uneksin unen, jossa olin todella onnellinen ja olin kauniissa paikassa. Ja tärkein oli, että ihmisiä ympärilläni olivat mukavia ja kilttejä, ja tunsin heidän rakastavan minua ja tunsin minun rakastavan heitä. En tiennyt silloin, että tämä ihana paikka, josta minä uneksin, oli Suomi. Suomi on aina sydämessäni. Minun aika Suomessa muutti elämäni. Ja se muutti minun elämäni, koska suomalaiset rakastavat minua ja he antavat niin paljon tai annetaan niin paljon ihmisille. Olen aina ihmeisen, kuinka paljon ettei auta, ettei muita. Ja Suomi on sielun kotipaikka. Ja se on pieni ihme maailmassa, että on paikka, jossa ihmisiä pitävät huolta toinen toisista. Ja jossa ihmiset tietävät, miten olla hiljainen ja nauttia luonnosta. Ja että on paikka maailmassa, että on Suomea.
Don't eat the Turkish pepper. Avoid at all costs. It's really, really powerfully salty. Don't be afraid to try salmiakki as long as it's mild. It's mild, then do it. Black licorice also. I arrived to Finland in the middle of winter, dead winter. It was early December. The sun was gone. It was cold. It was snowy. And I didn't speak the language. And so it was a big change. I remember the first time I saw the sun was about 2 weeks into the country. It was a clean country. It was very well organized. It's efficient. They just know how to run a country. I grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey, and so I was around New York City, a fair amount. And I think that's one of the greatest cities in the world, but it's not very clean. It's kind of a dirty city, to be honest, most of it. But I came to Finland, and I was in Helsinki, and I was looking for the garbage, and there was just none to be found. No, homeless people on the street or garbage everywhere or anything. Even down to like the metro is clean. Like no garbage like underneath the tracks or anything. It kind of blew me away, but I was a big fan. Speed limits were lower, so it took some patience to be okay driving so slow. Since coming home, my family says that I'm like driving Miss Daisy. Like I'm driving the speed limit when everyone around me is like at least 5 over. The age requirement to get your license in Finland is 17, if I remember right. It could be 18. Pardon me, it's 18. But what they'll do is a lot of times when you're 17 and a half, sometimes your parents will get you, it's called a mopo auto. It's like a miniature version of a car. Like it's not even as big as like a Mini Cooper, for example. And it has like a lawnmower engine equivalent, like a little 50cc engine. And so the car is, I don't think, capable of exceeding like 35 or 45 kilometers per hour. Like it's not governed, it's not limited. It's just like if you push the pedal all the way down, like you'll hit 50 kilometers an hour downhill with little tailwind. And you're maxed out at that, right? And so that was kind of funny, seeing that. It was a different experience. Well, I'm a big car guy, right? And so to see no trucks and not a ton of SUVs, but rather a lot of hatchbacks was different. That was something to get used to. Lots of like hatchbacks and compact cars, which sounds, very, not like nitpicky, but particular. But to me, that was different. That was something to get used to. I learned a couple of tongue twisters. One was vesihisisihisisa, which is the water snake hisses in the elevator. And I learned kokokokokoko, kokokokoko, which is to say gather the fire, gather the entire fire, gather the whole fire. Yeah, two letters just repeated in different ways, and it's a question and a statement. And I think the one that I'm the most proud of was a word that one of my companions taught me. And it's one of at least the longest words that I was aware of in the Finnish language. And it's not a practical word whatsoever, but it's just a matter of the fact that grammatically speaking, it's correct. It is authentic. It matches the grammar and the linguistic requirements for it to be a word. And so it was epäjärjestelmällisyyttämättömyydellänsä käänkö hänkin, which, if I remember right again, was to say, even like by the way of, or the method of, the lack of his or her organization do you suppose? One word, 52 letters. And it's a question. So that was always fun. One of, I would say, the don'ts is probably to strike up conversations with them on the street or like on a bus or train or something. And, if you're feeling lucky, I don't know, I guess you could take your chances. But if fitting in is your goal, then do as the Finns do. There's a joke. There's a joke that says, what's the difference between an extroverted and an introverted Finn? And an introverted Finn looks at their shoes when they're walking. An extroverted Finn looks at another person's shoes when they're walking. Right. And I say that because even Finns understand that. But, they are amazing, warm, kind-hearted people. However, a do is ask for help. Ask for directions. Finns love to help people when there's an honest need, and they like to practice English as well. That was a blessing and a curse for me, because I got to speak English, with people who wanted to. That was fun. And it was a curse because I couldn't speak Finnish, and so learning was tougher when they wouldn't speak it as often. Compliment ice hockey. Compliment the team, the national team, right? They won the World Masters, and they were very, very proud of that. That was a huge accomplishment. Oh, big do. Compliment them on their dog. Finns love dogs the way I don't even know what the equivalent is. Like, they just love dogs so much. And so that was always a fun thing that I did, was I would, stop someone and ask them about their dog. And even if the conversation never got to exactly where I was hoping it would go, they would love talking about their dogs, all about where it was from, what kind of dog it was, what its walk schedule was like, funny stories they had of it. And so they love that. They love dogs. Favorite foods in Finland. I speak for probably a lot of people who are non-native Finns in saying that not a ton about Finnish cuisine really surprised me, in the sense that it's not altogether that different. Finland is a first world country, and a lot of the same amenities that are found in America are found there. Fresh produce, lots of even pre-cooked stuff, kind of like Hungry Man meals and whatnot, packaged stuff. But given that, some of the things that I love to eat were Karelian pirakas, or riisipiraka. It's like a rice pie, which is, the best way I can describe it is that it's kind of like a rectangular bowl of a crust, I guess, and it's filled with like a rice and mashed potato mix. I would eat them for like lunch a lot because they're pretty light. They're not very heavy, but it's good energy. It's like mashed potatoes and rice. Put it in the oven and you let it bake and put some butter on it and cheese and ham and pepperoni and a little bit of sausage, and you're cooking. It was way good. Their candy is amazing. Their candy was so good. Their chocolate, kind of the main Finnish brand there is Karl Fazer, and they make some really good milk chocolate. And so I loved their chocolate and their candy. And I grew to like, ruisleipä, brown bread, kind of like brown bread. Can't remember what exactly it's called in English. But I really liked that. They sell that a lot. They eat that a lot. It was different at first. It's not that I didn't like it. It was just different. But I grew to really like that. There was one dish that was served typically right around Easter time, and it was a dessert. It's called mämmi. And what it was this basically like rye bread porridge is the best thing that I can, that's the best way I can describe it, is that it was like they would take rye bread and mash it up until real fine pieces and then put just enough water in there to make it like an oatmeal consistency, and then you eat it. And some people will eat it just straight without anything. Most people, though, will admit that it's best with cream and sugar. I myself was never a huge fan. It wasn't like gross, it wasn't bad, it didn't repulse me. It just wasn't really appealing either, I didn't think, to be honest. If someone put it in front of me, I'll eat it, because I can. I was just kind of eating like carbs is all it was. didn't bother me. But I would just load it up with just plenty of sugar and cream and just, over the lips and through the gums. Look out, stomach, here it comes. Just throw it back. This blood sausage. And it's not that crazy, but what I've heard is it's just like, it's a sausage that they make that's just a mix of like sausage meat and blood. And they just cook it, and it looks kind of like black when they serve it, because I mean that blood, when it sort of oxidizes it, when it cooks, it turns black, and so it makes it look not very appetizing. And I've heard it's not collectively appetizing, but it's an experience that you have to do. This was a two-edged sword because they are so incredibly direct, which in a way was a breath of fresh air coming from America. Whereas in America, I think it's one of the countries foremost probably in the world where people are socially very polite, collectively well-mannered, open and warm. It's not a weird thing at all to be on a train, on a bus, on the street, and strike up a conversation with someone. Not everyone will do it, but I think most people will respond if you do. But Finns aren't really that way. They're, I don't want to say socially closed off. I think they like their personal space. Like I said, are very direct. And so if they like something, they'll tell you. If they don't like something, they'll tell you. So it goes both ways. Reserved, I think, is a good way to put it. They trust in a relationship with a Finnish person takes time and effort. But they're the kind of people that, like I said, on that flip side, once that trust is there, once that's built, it's not going anywhere. You have a friend for life. And even if, for example, let's say you kind of drift ways and that friendship fizzles out a little bit, they'll never forget you. They'll always have fond feelings towards you. And I had really came to appreciate that. In an interesting way, it was kind of refreshing to have just a sense of absolute, unadulterated directness that was tough, but was always honest. So they have a big midsummer celebration, right? In the middle of summer, right? It's the summer solstice, longest day of the year. It's called Juhannus. And country pretty much shuts down. Everyone goes to their summer cottage, and they go either with friends or family, and they go to sauna, and they swim in the lake, and they relax, and they cook sausages, or in Finnish they cook makkara. And to cap it all off, typically the town, some people do it themselves, but typically the town or the city that they're in will host this big bonfire. And I'm not just talking about like, let's have a little beach bonfire and sing Kumbaya. No. There, at one point I was living in Joensuu, out in eastern Finland, and one of our friends took us to one of these bonfires. And this bonfire was maybe 10 or 12 foot high stack of wooden shipping crates or pallets, and they had leaned maybe 5 or 6 old wooden fishing boats kind of up against this crate pile. So it almost looked like a wooden Christmas tree or something. And the fire department was there, and they were set up on this little jetty that had jutted out into this lake. But they doused it with gasoline, and they light it up and let it blaze. And that's how they celebrate the longest day of the year. Just a bunch of pyromaniacs letting loose. And so it's one of those, not like quirky, but so just like individual, significant things that you really don't find anywhere else in the world, except for, in that part of the world. I don't know if it's a thing in Sweden or Norway or anything, but at least in Finland, that's the only place I've ever heard of something like that, and that was awesome. I loved that. I had the opportunity to live in 5 cities in Finland. I started in a small, sort of more commuter town, a suburb city called Hyvinkää. That was about 45 minutes north of Helsinki. one of the last stops on the R train. And I also lived in Joensuu, out in eastern Finland. Beautiful, beautiful summer city. Kind of close to the Russian border, so lots of funny Russian jokes about that. I lived in Jyväskylä, which is another gorgeous city in not quite central Finland. I don't want to say central because central is more north, but it was in the Lakeland district. So just beautiful lakes and forestry and scenery, and people spoke very clear Finnish there, which I loved, appreciated for sure. Then I lived in Helsinki, specifically in kind of a not suburb, but an area of the greater Helsinki area called Oulunkylä. But I oftentimes visited downtown Helsinki, so I spent lots of time there. And then I also lived in a city a little bit west of Helsinki called Espoo. And so that was the place where I lived the longest. I lived there for 6 months. And each other place was 4 months. So between all of them, I was in Finland for about 22 months. You love different things about each city. For example, if I were to raise a family, I would probably want to raise them in, for example, either Espoo or Jyväskylä. Beautiful cities, clean, kind of younger, I would say. Jyväskylä is a big college town, so there's just this unique energy to it. If it were just me and going to college, I'd probably live in Helsinki and go to a college there. If I were an adventurist, I'd probably live in Joensuu. I don't honestly know if I can pick just one, because they all meant very different things to me. And I learned things about myself, about life, that were so different, but so important at each and every time that I lived in each of those cities, that only that city and only that surrounding could have supplied. But given that, I would probably say that maybe Espoo was just a great all-around experience. It was a tough language to learn. The closest language to Finnish is Estonian. Because you have Latin languages, right, that for all intent and purpose are relatively close. Italian, Spanish, German, English, they all have Latin bases oftentimes. Still might not necessarily understand everything that the other person is saying, but sometimes if you know one language, you can catch on to some of the other language. And I don't remember which way was which. Finns could understand a little bit of what Estonians were saying, or Estonians could understand a little bit of what Finns were saying. It might have been the latter, that Estonians could understand a little bit of Finnish. And there were some roots in words that were similar, and some words were the same, but nonetheless, the structures of the language were still very different. And so I think Finnish just exists in a plane of its own. With Finnish, I mean, it's the same Romanian alphabet we have, with the exception of just a couple of characters. But it's just that there are so many cases to learn and so many exceptions to rules and how rules change in different cases to learn, and you have to be able to speak it and understand it. I remember I was sitting on this bus. It was in Jyväskylä, and it was maybe November, some point, October, November, and I was sitting on this bus, and we were crossing the bus. I remember where it was when it happened, right? And this bus was going over this big bridge that went from sort of the main part of the city to another part of the city that was just a little bit further south than the city, just across this lake. I was sitting next to this sort of elderly lady, and I turned to her and I asked her a question. I don't remember what I might have asked, but I asked her some kind of question, and she responds in kind, and we struck up a basic but very friendly conversation. And I remember, I was maybe 10 or 15 seconds away from getting off at my stop, and I cut her off and I say, "Hey, I'm so sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but my stop is coming up. Just wanted to say thank you so much for chatting. I appreciate it. Have a great day." And she says, "Oh, wait, I have something for you." And I say, "You have something for me?" And she says, "Yes, of course." She says, "Do you like caramel?" And I say, like candy caramel?" She says, "Yes, of course. Do you like caramel?" And I say, yeah, I do. I love caramel. And she goes, oh, great. And she kind of, reaches over and reaches her hand into her purse, and she pulls out this chocolate bar. And it was kind of a smaller one, but it was one of my favorite kinds of chocolate bars. And she says, thank you so much for everything you do. You're such a good man. Like, have a good day. And I took it and I said, thank you so much. I will remember this for a long time. And I got off the bus and ate my chocolate bar. And even though the chocolate bar is long gone, right, that memory of just the really deeply ingrained kindness that she showed a completely random stranger, I genuinely believe is going to last me a lifetime. In a small way. I mean, she showed me love that day. She had no other reason to give me anything. Nonetheless, a signature Finnish sweet. And I think it's things like that really took my breath away. That really made me fall in love with Finland and with the Finnish people, with the good, the bad, and the ugly, with everything that they stand for. And to take them in absolute stride, and to be proud of the fact that I actually am a little bit Finnish. I'm a quarter Finnish, which was an incredible experience to have my heritage in part from Finland and to be there. Niinpä. Voisin sanoa niin, että kaipaan Suomea todella vakavasti, että niitä tilaisuuksia ja niitä mahdollisuuksia, jotka ovat tulleet elämisestä Suomessa, ovat kestäneet todella ajan myötä, että se on todella muuttunut minut, minusta minuun, että Suomi on niin kaunis, niin täydellistä, niin mahtava maa, että siinä ovat monta rakaita ihmisiä, jotka ovat todella lähellä minun sydämeeni. Että minun sydämeni on vielä Suomessa, sanotaanko näin, että kun lähdin pois Suomesta, että jäin takas minusta iso osa sydämestä, että tavallaan ainakin Suomen kansalaiset ovat nyt minun kansalaista, että se on yksi parhaista maista maailmassa, period. Se oli uskomatonta 2 vuotta, joka minulle annettiin. Ja siitä mä oon uskomattomasti kiitollinen. Siis rakastan Suomea.
So Finland was Sweden for about 500 years until the early 1800s. So you'll notice that Swedish is an official language in Finland. Some areas of Finland, Swedish is actually the majority language. Swedish-speaking Finns are only about 6% of the population, but especially on the west coast, across the Gulf of Bothnia from Sweden, you have a lot of Swedish-speaking Finns. They're Finnish people and Finnish citizens, but they speak Swedish as their native tongue. So if you serve up in Kokkola, in Vasa, there's a lot of Finnish there, so you'll be fine, but you'll see a lot of Swedish. And then there's one city in Finland, Jakobstad in Swedish and Pietarsaari in Finnish. That city is still about 50% Swedish speaking. So you'll go around and you'll be speaking in Finnish, and you'll have people say, I don't speak Finnish. Jag kan inte prata finska. Or they'll ask you, pratar du svenska? Do you speak Swedish? And you'll say, no, I don't. So that's why you'll see Swedish everywhere in Finland, is because Finland was Sweden until the 1800s. And then Sweden and Russia fought a war, and Sweden lost. And what they lost was the territory of Finland. And so Russia took control of Finland, but they didn't really try to conquer it. They left it as, they call it a grand duchy. It was an autonomous Grand Duchy. So even though Russia controlled Finland, they didn't really govern in Finland. Finland kind of took care of itself for about 100 years after the end of the war with Sweden. But, the 1800s, a time of great turmoil in Europe and a lot of nationalistic feeling, and that happened in Finland too. So you have a lot of intellectuals, artists, writers, composers, who start thinking about what it means to be Finnish and they kind of create a Finnish national identity. They start championing the use of the Finnish language over the use of Swedish in the elite. They start trying to make sure Finnish is being taught, Finnish is being studied. They write literature in Finnish. They make art, like paint and draw and write music about Finnish folklore. This is all happening in the late 1800s. Finally, you get World War I, which happens, and Russia gets really involved in World War I, and it causes the fall of the Russian Empire in 1917. And so when Russia starts having its civil war in 1917, that's when Finland is able to break away and become its own country. So that started in 1917, and I feel like it was 1918 that Finland actually declared independence. So 1917, 1918, the end of World War I, the fall of the Russian Empire, that's when Finland became an independent nation. But then, Russia became the Soviet Union, and so about 30 years after Finland declares independence, Russia, the USSR, becomes involved in World War II. Well, the whole world becomes involved in World War II, and Russia invades Finland. The Soviet Union invaded Finland, and Russia is like 10 times the size of Finland population-wise, but it's called one of the biggest miracles in Finnish history is that the Finnish army held the line. Russia assumed it would be able to take Helsinki in a day, and instead Finland remained an independent country throughout World War II. It's a big miracle because Finland is a very small country and Russia is a very large country. This is where Finland's spiritual history comes in. The president of Finland led a national prayer before the soldiers went to war to defend themselves. And they asked that Finland would be protected, and it was. It was protected. God protected Finland from Russia. The problem was that since Russia was part of the Allies, Finland had to turn to the Axis powers to defend itself and keep Russia out. So at the end of the war, Finland lost the war because it was allied with Germany. And so after the war, when countries that had lost were being required to pay huge war debts, Finland was involved in that. Finland had a lot of war debt, but Finland is the only country that lost World War II to fully repay its debt to the United States. The only one. And Finland is also the only country sharing a border with Russia that did not become part of the Soviet Union. So Finland is really special, really a special place for that reason. Finnish people have, it's called sisu. It's one of the qualities that Finnish people possess. You can't translate it into English. It just means kind of like gutsy and courageous and stubborn, all rolled into one. That's this word sisu that Finnish people have. That's why they've lasted as an independent nation for so long. Part of the reason Finland feels so polite is because they were caught between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So this national identity that Finland has kind of developed out of this intense scrutiny it was always under, And because of that, it couldn't join, Finland is not a member of NATO. It's not a member of a lot of treaty organizations that exist in the West because it was right next to Finland and to Russia. And so it couldn't do that without provoking this large neighbor that it had. Anyway, Finland has gone through a lot of trial and a lot of terrible times in Finland. But right now, Finland is wealthy. It's one of the wealthiest nations in the world. It has one of the best standards of living in the world. You can Google best places to live, and Finland is almost always in the top 10. People have what they need in terms of physical needs. They have housing, they have food, they have education free for everyone, they have healthcare free for everyone. It's a socialist republic. Social republic, not socialist, social republic. That's a big distinction. Because they have everything they need, they don't seek spiritual things very often anymore. They have what they need, so why do they need religion? So the spiritual heritage of Finland is a lot weaker than it has been in the past. So I arrived in Finland. I think we flew out on December 4th with the time change that made it December 5th by the time I arrived in country. In Finland, the winter is very dark and very cold. In December, there's only about 4 hours of daylight. It's way up far north. So when I got to Finland, I got there in the worst part of the year. The worst part of the year for Finland is late November and early December. It's your darkest time of the year. You're headed into the darkest time of the year. It's cold. It might be snowing, but if it's not cold enough, it might just be sleeting and slush. But the summer in Finland is worth everything you go through in the winter. So if you're arriving in the summer, congratulations, got there in the best time, and you're in for it. If you arrive there in the winter, things will get better, I promise. If you make sure that you're exercising, eating correctly, getting enough vitamin D is absolutely essential. When you don't have sun, you don't get as much vitamin D, and it really affects how you're able to regulate your mood. You do not need to worry in terms of crime and safety. Finland is one of the least corrupt nations in the world. Routinely is in the top 5. You can Google. It's true. There is so little violent crime. The only thing is people in Finland they do like alcohol. They drink a lot of alcohol. And so you'll meet drunk people who you sometimes have to just be careful around. Usually they're harmless, but Finland is so safe. Just like normal personal caution is all you need to worry about. Like, don't be reckless, and definitely don't be stupid, but about where you are and where your surroundings. Like, if you can see it's a dangerous situation, leave. You would do the same at home. But for the most part, you don't need to worry. Finland is very safe. Finland is a pretty Western country, so you don't have to worry about being in a country where they eat completely differently from the way you're used to eating. They have grocery stores everywhere. The only weird foods you'll eat are the ones that you choose to eat, essentially. And I think you should try some of the Finnish dishes, but you don't have to be worried. They have bread, they have fruit, they have cereal, they have peanut butter. You might have to look a little bit for the peanut butter. Lidl is the store that sold peanut butter when I was in Finland. And it'll be like a little bit different from what you're used to, but not very much. The only thing you can't buy is like root beer, So don't be worried about eating. Eating is great in Finland. Some things that I love about Finnish food are it is fresh. They don't use preservatives in hardly anything. So the bread is fresh. The milk is fresh. Pasteurized, but fresh. The cheese is fresh. One thing that does mean is you have to eat it faster than you would in America. It won't keep for a long time. Like, I had a loaf of bread for like 3 months and it didn't go moldy. That is not true in Finland. You have like 2 weeks maybe for the bread, maybe a week on the milk. Okay, so you have to eat it quickly when you buy it, but you can buy it. I love rye bread. In Finland, it's called ruisleipä. It's a dark rye, not like the rye bread we have in America. It's chewier and a bit hardier, so you'll need to adjust to it, but it's very good, very filling. They sell it everywhere. Eat it, it's good. They also have oat bread that's better than any bread I've had in the United States ever. I love bread. Finnish bread is the best. Finnish cheese, milk, ice cream, all the dairy products, super awesome. In terms of dishes, what they call perusruoka will be like potatoes, meat chunks, and like a gravy sauce. So you have your boiled potatoes that are not peeled. That's okay. Don't worry about it. It's great. And then you pour over it like this meaty gravy sauce. It's like gravy, but with the meat chunks put in it and all cooked together. So it's super good. With a side of like boiled carrots and then lingonberries or puolukka. Those are those tart berries. Basically, if you go to IKEA and eat the meatballs, That's kind of what Finnish perusruoka is. Tastes really good. But you'll also be able to find everything there from like Asian and Mexican, Latin American. My mom always used to ask me, like, what do Finns eat? As if it was some strange, weird, like if you went to China, you'd have to eat duck or something, or like dog. There's nothing like that in Finland. It's a Western country. It has some Scandinavian traditions, but you can find pretty much anything you want there. But I love perusruoka. It's so good. Also, if you ever get the chance to eat reindeer meat, do it. It's so good. It's so good. And where else in the world are you going to get to eat reindeer? Since Finland is up north, they eat a lot of fish. It's a big part of their diet. If you don't like fish, I didn't like fish. I still don't really like fish, but I could eat fish now. Salmon, they eat a lot of salmon. And it's actually really good in Finland because it's so much fresher than you would be able to get in many places in the United States. You can just like smoke it. Don't eat the raw smoked salmon, eat the cooked smoked salmon. What else? There's lohikeitto, which is this cream-based soup that they make with the salmon and potatoes and dill, and it's really good. So good. There's one fish dish that you should definitely try when you're in Finland, but I'm not going to guarantee that you like it. It's called silli. And what it is, it's pickled herring. And it comes in a variety of flavors. You just got to try it. You might like it, you might not, but it's something you definitely have to eat at least once. Also, there's an Easter dish called mämmi. I don't even know. It's made out of rye. It's supposed to be a dessert, but you have to put a ton of sugar on it to make it sweet, and it's not bad. I like mämmi. By now, someone has told you that Finnish is the hardest language in the world to learn. And I am here to tell you that it is not. It is not impossible to learn Finnish or to even be good at Finnish. A lot will depend on your own affinity or your own talent at learning languages, how advanced you get in the language, but anyone can learn to speak Finnish. The reason you've heard it so hard is because it's so different from English. It's different from a lot of other common languages that English speakers study, like Spanish, French, German. It's not related to any of those languages. The only languages it's related to that are widely spoken are Hungarian and Estonian. What sets Finnish apart from a lot of other languages is that all of the syntactic function, the grammatical function of the words that you use, most of it is carried by endings that you put on the words and not by separate words. So like in English, we have a lot of prepositions in, and, in, on, to, from, about. All of those meanings are contained in endings that go on the word. So for example, the Finnish word for dog is koira. So if dog, koira, is the subject of your sentence, there are no endings on it. But if it's going to be the direct object of your sentence, so like, I saw the dog, koira becomes koiran. I saw the dog, minä näin koiran, with an N at the end. The same thing if you change the function. If you make it the object of a preposition, there will be a different ending for that. So if you say, I want to talk about the dog, koira becomes koirasta. If you're worried about learning Finnish, I think the key to learning Finnish is learning the meaning of all the endings, and there are 15 of them, 15 different endings, which sounds like a lot, but you can learn them, and the more you know about what those mean, and the more you know about the patterns and the ways that they attach onto the words that they describe, or the words that they are going to be used with, then it just is a game of patterns. You just have to learn the patterns, and then as you add more words into your vocabulary, you'll be able to talk about anything. It did take me about 8 months to feel like I was comfortable speaking to someone without a lot of preparation beforehand. I was pretty good at Finnish, and I got told that I spoke Finnish very well for a foreigner. Don't be worried about not knowing how to say something. I would almost work harder on learning how to just speak and not worry so much about how it's coming out, but worry more about what you're trying to say and worry about the message that you're trying to convey. And then as you progress, you'll get better and better at doing that grammatically. But in the beginning, you just need to be bold about speaking. Good luck with learning Finnish. I promise you can do it. I promise you'll grow to love it. So, hello. Terve. Terve. In the T-E-R-V-E. Terve. That's a general greeting you can use with anyone that you meet. Some other greetings you might use, if you're on the street wanting to be friendly, you could say moi. Moi. M-O-I. Moi. And that's just like, hey, hi. How are you? Mitä kuuluu? Mitä kuuluu? It means what belongs. But that's how you ask, how are you doing? It's like, what's happening? Kind of like, what's happening? Mitä kuuluu? So if you are meeting someone for the first time, you could say, terve, mitä kuuluu? Hello, how are you? That actually might be better for someone you've met before, that you have introduced yourself to already. If someone asks you, mitä kuuluu? You can just reply with hyvä, which means good. Hyvä. You'll notice that some of my vowel sounds are not familiar to you. That's okay. The more you hear them and the more you practice with them, especially the y, which is spelt with a y in Finnish. The letter y is said y. You have the o with umlauts over, that's and then a with umlauts is a, which you already know. Thank you. Kiitos. Kiitos. K-I-I-T-O-S. Kiitos. I'm sorry. Anteeksi. Anteeksi. A-N-T-E-E-K-S-I. Anteeksi. Not really a word for please in Finnish. If you feel like you want to say an equivalent, you could just say ole hyvä, which means be good. And then you would say ole hyvä ja istu. Please sit. Ole hyvä ja syö. Be good and eat, or please eat. But that's pretty formal. Most people won't expect you to say please. They'll just expect that you're polite. So that's one thing about Finnish. The command form is used more often than we do in English. We always want to hedge our commands with something like please, would you do this, will you do this? In Finland, they'll just say the command form, and it's not impolite. So don't worry if people sound really harsh, where they say like istukaa, that means sit down. That's polite. It's not rude, it's not forceful. You'll tell by the tone of voice whether or not they're angry at you. Most of the time they're not. Finns are very, very polite. Very polite people. Yes is kyllä, but you'll hear a lot also yo. That's kind of like yeah. So you have kyllä, which is yes, and yo, which is kind of like yeah. No is a. And then nice to meet you, you'll be using all the time hauska tavata. Hauska tavata. And that means fun to meet. Nice to meet you. Hauska tavata. Hauska tavata. And those are some common greetings and phrases for Finnish that you can start using right away. You can go up to anyone you meet and say terve, mitä kuuluu.
One thing that everybody's going to hear is that the language is hard. And it is. There's like really no way around that. There's 19 cases for verbs. There's like 6 different conjugations. I read once in a book that there's 5,200 different derivatives of every verb, which really makes it a memorization game. I mean, it's pretty bad in that sense. But I remember in the airport, we were at baggage claim, and there was a mom talking to her little kid, and she was like, babbling in baby talk, like the most simple Finnish, and I had no idea what she was saying. So just none. I was completely clueless. So the language is like the first weird thing about being in a foreign place. You walk down the street and nobody is speaking English, but people are just carrying on like everything's completely normal, and it's really, really weird. It's also weird leaving and getting back into English. I would say there's 3 big cities: Helsinki, Tampere, and Turku, which is down on the southwestern coast. If you get the chance to go to Turku, it's really the nicest part of the country. It's old, so it's very Swedish. Really pretty countryside. You're right on the ocean. The city's big, but it's not that big. So looking back, Turku was really kind of a hot destination while I was there. That's where a lot of people wanted to go. A lot of people work for Nokia. Obviously, the company Nokia is Finnish, especially the closer you get to Helsinki. The food is really plain. They don't really do anything other than use salt. Nothing's spicy, nothing's sweet. Somebody told me once that Finns love to live, he said, keskellä ei mitään, which, when you learn Finnish means literally out in the middle of nowhere. So Finns are the most happy when they don't see their neighbors, when they don't have to see anybody else. They tend to be kind of reserved people, which is really neat. And when you get to know them, it makes it really special. But a significant portion of the population, obviously there's a lot of people that live in Helsinki, a fifth of the population, but a huge majority of people too live in cities of just a few thousand people, and they live so far away from their neighbors that you'd never really see anybody else. I remember going to a couple dinner appointments where we drove an hour and a half to get to somebody's random house that was out in the middle of nowhere. They love lakes. If you have a house on a lake, you've got everything in the world you could possibly want. Finland declared their independence on December 6th from Russia during World War I, and they're incredibly patriotic. I always thought that Americans were hands down the most patriotic people in the world. So I feel like we have a good reason to be. We fought for our freedom, and then I met the Finns, and they are every bit as patriotic as Americans are. They declared their independence, and it lasted for about 12 years, and World War II broke out. And an agreement between Hitler and Stalin was that Stalin could have the Baltic, Estonia, Finland, Lithuania, Latvia. And so Russia invaded all of those areas, and they took all of them over, without a fight until they got to the Finnish border. And Finland fought them 3 different times. At one point, the Russian army was bigger than the population of Finland, and Finland won all 3 times. And it was miraculous. There's a lot of different things that went on that contributed to that. It was the coldest winter in recorded history in Europe. The Russian army, the tanks froze. The Finnish army was trained to fight on cross-country skis. But, you had a small little army defeat the Russians, and they still remember it. And they're still very, very patriotic about it. They sing Oi Suomi, Finland, which is kind of a national anthem of sorts. Most people recognize the tune because it's Be Still My Soul. It's actually a Finnish hymn. It's a Finnish song about Finland, and they sing it on Christmas during Independence Week. And it's funny because Finns don't show a lot of emotion. They don't really cry a lot, especially the older generation. I heard once that the word I love you really only gets said, a handful of times in somebody's life. Like, you don't really tell somebody you love them unless you absolutely do, and it's a really, really special situation. So they're really reserved, but when they sing the national anthem, it was really funny because everybody would cry. So there'd be all these really rough and tough older guys in the wards that were just bawling. That was a pretty neat experience. After World War II, they were the only country that paid off their debts to the United States and other countries. Everybody else defaulted. And then they also had to pay Russia back for the wars that they fought as part of the stipulation. And it made the country super poor for a really long time. It made the people learn how to work very hard. In my opinion, it made the Finns a little more conservative and a little different than most of their European counterparts. I remember talking to an older guy about his childhood, and he told me that one of the things that he remembered was being hungry and cold all the time. But anytime he'd see a train going towards Russia, it'd be full of wood and coal and food. And he remembered thinking like, wow, that'd be really nice if we had wood for our fireplace, if we had coal for our fireplace, if we had food at night. Because that was just the situation that they lived in, where all the excess that they had was going to pay off other countries. It made a very unique people. possibly is probably part of the reason why they tend to be a little reserved and a little coarse on the outside sometimes, is I think a lot of them still remember that. One of my first impressions was, I remember thinking like, I'm in Europe, and it really, there wasn't as much to do as I thought. A lot of the country got pretty destroyed during World War II, what with fighting the Russians. They also fought the Germans. Pretty much the northern, I might even say the northern half of the country got burned to the ground and rebuilt. So it's very modern. A lot of Helsinki got bombed, so a lot of it's been rebuilt too. It's kind of modern. And it's not like in Italy or a France where there's museums everywhere and world famous buildings everywhere. I bet most people can't even name like a building in Finland. So for the first few weeks it was like, oh, there's not a lot to do. But the prettiest part about Finland is the landscape, because it's so untouched. Anytime you can go see a lake, it's just incredible. They call it like Minnesota. Their catchphrase for their country is the land of, they say the land of the midnight sun, or they'll say the land of the 10,000 lakes. So anytime you can kind of get out of the cities and go see these lakes, it's just incredible. It's so pretty. The Finns like to build cabins around bodies of water, and they'll go do the sauna, which is actually just a sauna, but they'll go do sauna, and then they'll run out and jump into the water. And you do that in the middle of the summer at 2 in the morning, and it's still light outside. They also have something called Avanto, which is the same thing, only it's in the middle of the winter. So you like literally go cut a hole out in the ice, you sit in your sauna, you get it up to super hot, you stay in there as long as you can, and then you run out and you jump into this little hole. And they'll tell you have to make sure you do it with somebody else, because if you pass out when you jump into the water, you're toast. So that's something that I want to go back and do. But really, they call their cabins mukis. It's just the most incredible experience, because there's these little 1-2 room cabins. They're log cabins. They're in just the most beautiful places in the world. They go there to have fun, to eat, and to do the sauna thing, and it's just an incredible experience. Rovaniemi is a city that like everybody wants to go to. That's where the Santa Claus village is. Joulupuki, or Santa Claus, is there. And it's a kind of a destination, like international destination hotspot. I always see it on lists of best Christmas cities in the world. There's reindeer up there all over the place. I did get to serve in Lappeenranta, which is on the eastern part of Finland, so it's right by the Russian border. So I did go see the Russian border, which was pretty radical. That was a pretty surreal experience. And the countries, they obviously don't fight anymore, but I don't really think they really like each other that much either. So it's a pretty serious border. It's not like the United States and Canada, where there might be a chain link fence or there's probably nothing. It's pretty serious. They still have like the old sniper towers up. They still have pictures up about how you'll be shot if you cross the border, which I don't know if that actually would happen or not, but that was pretty interesting. Western Finland is, in my opinion, the prettiest part of the country. It's old. It's like old Finland. The buildings are significantly older, and it's very Swedish, which is really kind of pretty. So I really liked being in Western Finland. I tell everybody to go to the churches, because the churches are just incredible. There's always like a town hall, and then there's always a church, and they're always just kind of like straight across from each other. And even small little cities, like you can go to a city of 2,000 or 3,000 people, and they'll have this like magnificent church, even though the people aren't super religious. That was always kind of fun. So I would see as much of those as you can. Think of the winters are just incredible, and people do get a little moody because it's so dark and cold, but it's also just gorgeous. When it snows, and it snows a lot. I have some pictures of some buried cars. It's really humid there too, and so it frosts. I mean, I've got pictures of pine trees with frost coming off of it that's like 3 or 4 inches long. And it just makes it beautiful. They love to cross country ski there. There really aren't any mountains, at least until you go really far north. And so instead of downhill skiing, people cross country ski just all over the place. I always thought that was kind of fun. We actually went and helped It was called the Finlandia Hiihto, and it was a marathon distance cross country ski race. We went and helped volunteer at that. That was really neat. They have a lot of ski jumps, like what they'll do in the Olympics. Those crazy guys that'll go jump, 130, 140 feet. There was a guy from the city of Lahti that won a couple medals in the Olympics a few years in a row. He's considered one of the greatest ski jumpers of all time. And they still in most cities have active ski jumps. So I remember going out and watching him do that a few times, and that was insane. That was really a neat experience. I saw a guy crash too, but he was okay. He walked away from it. But I always thought that was just insane. There's a big fortress outside of the harbor of Helsinki. It's called Suomenlinna, which is like Castle Island. It's really, really neat. There's also some castles over in eastern Finland, and they're not like the medieval castles that you'd think of. They're not as cool as castles in like Germany or France, but they're still pretty neat. They're just cool to see and to go tour, and they're always more than happy to bring you through things. The town halls are always open, and they're always they're usually really pretty buildings. And so I remember always trying to visit the town halls just to kind of look around. They loved that we were Americans speaking Finnish, and they actually would usually kind of show us around for a little bit. They also, each city's got its own like crest of arms, and the cities make like little pins with those sills on them, and you can collect them. So I've probably got 20 pins from all these different city halls that I visited and I got. And like I said, they loved having Americans there. That was always cool. Street food, if you can find it, was like always really good. They'll have like meat pies or like apple pies that you can buy, and they're just incredible. They're super good. And the ice cream there still to this day is the best ice cream I've had in my life. So you'll see ice cream just all over the place. It's worth spending €1 or €2 to buy it because it's awesome. I've heard it said, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that they eat more ice cream per capita than anywhere else in the world except for like maybe one country. So you gotta take advantage of that. And I know this might sound kind of lame right now, but it was a big deal there. Shopping was huge. Finns are very trendy, so shopping was actually kind of a big deal, and we had a lot of fun with that, trying to find just nice stuff. Finnish food is pretty plain. You would go to like some of the foreign restaurants. There's a lot of Middle Eastern restaurants there, a lot of Asian restaurants, and we'd always request things like extra spicy, and they'd be like, okay, I'll make it super spicy just for you. And it like wouldn't be spicy at all. I'd feel like they put maybe a little bit of pepper on it because they know if they make stuff spicy, the Finns hate it. I ate potatoes with every meal that I ever went to. They love boiled potatoes. So the pizza's awesome because it's not like American pizza. It's very European, really thin crust, tons of toppings. I've had everything from like every type of fruit imaginable on a pizza, whether it's pineapple, mango, cherries, lingonberries, to something as strange as reindeer meat. I have had a reindeer meat pizza. But the pizza's awesome. But the only gross thing I have to warn people about, traditional Finnish Christmas food is a salad that's made of beets, pickles, and apples chopped up. And then they eat ham, which isn't bad, with like a gravy thing on it, which, like I said, isn't bad. But then you have potato casserole, carrot casserole, and then like a turnip casserole. I threw up my first Christmas, and just for the record, the Finns don't like it either. I don't know why. It's like tradition. Like the old people like it, no one else does. But Christmas is the most incredible day. They love Christmas. They celebrate it really, really well. But the food is not part of that, just as a heads up. They drink non-alcoholic beer on Christmas. It just burns the whole way down, and it's not good. They're really big into what they call makara. It's just like sausage, and it's pretty incredible. They cut it up and grill it all the time, especially during the summer. Like I'm salivating just thinking about it now. It's pretty good. Like all sorts of different types, like stuff filled with cheese, stuff filled with this, and it's always a lot of fun. An older couple, they brought me over a tape. It's like how to speak Finnish, It was like one of those like really touristy tapes. It was like it told you how to ask where a restaurant is and where's the bathroom and how to say thank you. And then they went through the alphabet, and I was like, oh, I'm so excited to hear the Finnish alphabet, because I thought I'd heard it was really different. Well, long story short, it's not. They use the Swedish alphabet. But there are a couple different letters. Anyway, I threw this tape in, and the guy said, Finnish alphabet. And then he started saying in Finnish, A, B, C, D, E, F. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is pretty straightforward. And then all of a sudden he said, Ruotsalainen A, Ruotsalainen Ö. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like what is that? I thought that whole thing was one letter. I didn't even figure it out until I was in Finland that all he meant, he was saying Ruotsalainen is Swedish. So he was saying Swedish A and Swedish Ö, which are really the only two different letters. The A is an A with dots over it, and the Ö is an O with dots over it. And then the one other really tricky part is that Y actually makes an Ö sound. And Americans really struggle with some of those vowels, especially the Ruotsalainen Ö, because it's not a noise that we make very often in English. But those are the tricky sounds, the A, the I, and the I, because they don't really sound a whole lot different. But the nice thing about pronunciation in Finnish is it's phonetic. So once you kind of learn it, you don't have to relearn it. Everything is said the exact way it's spelled, which was really, really nice. They pause on double consonants. So if you've got two consonants next to each other, you break that up. Instead of like lampy, you'd say lampy, because there's that extra enunciation in there that helps them know that there's two letters. There was like a really funny catchphrase that used to get tossed around a lot. We'd say something along the lines of, sammako tapaman sinun mies, or sammako tava. Anyway, they sound really, really similar. One means, can we come meet your husband? The other one means a frog is going to kill your husband, which are like super, super, like obviously if you're walking around telling people like, hey, a frog's going to come kill your husband, they know what you're trying to say, but they're still going to laugh a lot at you. But pronunciation is one of those things, like I said, you can choose to be good at that. I really feel like, in my opinion, it's just taking the time to decide, do I sound good or do I sound bad? And you're never going to like fake somebody out to the point that they think you're a Finn. So the word warmer is lämpimämpi. The word driver is ajaya. So I'd always, when people would ask me to say a Finnish sentence, I'd say that driver is warmer than that driver, which is a sentence that makes absolutely no sense. But in Finnish, it's tuo ajaja on lämpimämpi kuin tuo ajaja. It sounds like ridiculous. That's what I always tell people. You can have the best Finnish in the world, and if you sound bad, no one can understand you. I struggled with Finnish a lot. I did really have a hard time with the language. It took me a long time to learn it. And, I don't know if I ever was like ultra proficient in it, but I sounded good when I spoke it. I felt like I had a good accent. And because of that, I think people thought I spoke better than I did. Because of the consonants and the how easy it is to, case in point, sammako is a different word than samako. One means can we come or can we meet, and the other one means frog. So because of that, it's easy to say things that sound really, really stupid. One thing I did, I wanted to say we're sorry. And usually you just say like anteeksi, which is like excuse me, but I wanted to say like we're really sorry. And the way to say that is olemme, we are, olemme pahoillamme, like we're really, really sorry. But I didn't know how to, I didn't know how to like pronounce it or say it. And instead I ended up saying olemme, we are pahoilaisia, which means like we are devils. But the funny thing about the Finnish language is devil is like one of the worst words. Like you think of the worst word in English and its equivalent in Finnish is a reference to the devil. Whether it's by name, something like Satan is considered very, very offensive, or paholainen, which is devil. And so basically is what I did is I swore in front of 16 members. I said, we're devils instead of we're sorry. And I think for the next 6 months, because I was in that ward for a really long time, the kids would make fun of me. So you got to be careful with that. To us, they sound the exact same. And to the Finns, they obviously don't.
I loved picking berries in Finland. It was one of my favorite things to do. It was really fun. If you have the chance to go berry picking in Finland, you'll love it. I honestly, I love it so much. I miss it. I loved picking strawberries, or one time we went to a forest and just got to pick blueberries, and it was so fun. I love just how peaceful Finland is. It was always so peaceful, and I don't know, that's something that I feel like is hard to find in other places, and I really miss that. I also miss just all of the lakes there and all of the trees. I guess just nature in general. It's really beautiful, just so green, and the lakes, they're like a glass. It's so beautiful. They'll reflect all of the trees, and it's beautiful. I also miss the public transportation there. Metros, trolleys, and then they have like all the buses, trains. It's really cool. They're really good their system is just really awesome. I think the thing that I miss the most is the people. I really miss all of the friends that I made there. So I got to Finland in August, which is the perfect time to go to Finland. Everything is so green. And I think, if I remember right, Finland is like 70 to 80% forest. And so it's beautiful in the summertime. So that was just something that I loved. I just fell in love with it right away because everything was so green and so peaceful and so clean. I guess some of the culture shocks, I feel like I didn't really have a lot of culture shocks there, but some random things are, their elevators there are really tiny. It only fits like 2 or 3 people, and when you're in the elevator, there's not like a door that's closed. You'll just be going up it and you'll see the different doors from the different floors like moving, or the wall. So you're like enclosed in it, but I don't know, it's kind of scary. So that was kind of just like a weird little thing about Finland, but it was fun to see that like elevators aren't the same everywhere. That was never something that that had never crossed my mind, that elevators would be different. In the winter, when it's really snowy, it's different in Finland because they don't plow their streets. Instead, they have these machines that will just like lay down little layers of rocks, like little pebbles. They're just like really tiny. And it was weird because then it would snow again and then they'd put more rocks down. So instead of like plowing or I guess that's what you'd call it, plowing the sidewalks, they would just keep laying rocks down. So by the end of the winter, it was just this thick thing of ice with layers of rock in between it. And then when all of the ice melted, they had these machines that would come and recycle the rocks. They'd come pick them up, and then they would bring them, like they'd use them again the next year. One thing that I love about Finland is how much they care about the environment, because the environment is really important to me and to my family. And it was really cool to go to Finland and kind of feel like I finally had people that really understood that. And, you know, I felt like I finally had a community of people that really valued the environment and just really taking care of it. Not that people here don't, but it just is such a big part of their life there. They're always outside in nature. They're always walking their dogs, which I love dogs. And so it was really fun. I remember I always was excited to see the little paw prints in the snow, or just like to pet all the dogs. Even if it was freezing cold outside, they'd take them on walks, and just were really good at like being outside and enjoying nature. And they also have a really cool recycling system there. They recycle basically everything, and it's really cool. I feel like it takes a lot of guilt off of me to know like I'm able to recycle so much and conserve so much, and just really take care of the environment. Finland is super safe, so I didn't really have a lot of dangerous experiences. They were just a classic few run-ins with drunks because they do like to drink in Finland. I remember one time I was on the street with my companion and it was winter, so it was really dark, and it was just us two and then this guy, and he was very drunk, but we didn't realize when we first approached him, and then we were talking to him and he started to like lean in, trying to give us both a hug, and I remember my self-defense came out and I like pushed my companion out of the way and like spun around and then we kind of just ran away. But I don't know, Finland's really safe, so that was one of the scariest things that happened. So I actually got to go back to Finland this summer, and it was so fun because I finally got to experience the Finnish sauna, which I had been wanting to do my whole mission, but I just couldn't. We just didn't have time for it. And it was really fun. I went to one of my friends' Micky's, which is like their summer cottage, and he had a wood-burning sauna, and it was really fun. I was with my brother, and we just like got to be in the sauna, and then we would go and we'd jump in the freezing cold lake. It was so cold, but that's what they do in Finland. They'll be in the sauna and then run and jump in the lake. So we did that like 2 or 3 times. He even had shampoo and conditioner in the sauna, so it was really fun. After our hair was wet, we put some shampoo in it and then we ran back to the lake and jumped in and washed it out. And it was cool to get to experience that part of the Finnish culture. I love Finnish food. It's so yummy. And I really miss it because it's kind of hard to replicate it in the US. The ingredients are kind of different. I think my very favorite Finnish food is lohikeitto, which it's salmon soup. And it's so yummy. It's this soup that's kind of in a creamy, liquidy sauce. I don't know how to explain that. It's creamy, but it's not super thick. And then it has like thick chunks of potatoes and salmon and a lot of dill and some carrots sometimes. And it's so yummy, especially when it's really cold outside. I always loved going over to people's houses and having some salmon soup. It always warmed me up and it tasted so yummy. But I think another thing that I loved was the desserts in Finland. My favorite dessert was probably pulla, which is like Finnish sweetbread. There's one, people sometimes say it tastes like a cinnamon roll. I think it's very different, but kind of similar. It has cardamom in it, and it's so yummy. I feel like you can't really make it in the US. I've tried, and it's pretty good, but I definitely have days that I just want to go to a bakery in Finland and just try some pulla. It's so good. The craziest Finnish food was probably, it's called mammi. I don't really know how to explain it, but they have it every Easter, and it's really funny because a lot of Finns don't like it, but it's kind of their tradition to eat it. And it's pretty much like rye and I don't even know what else is in it, water and stuff. It honestly looks like poo. Like they admit that, and it's really weird. But if you put a lot of cream and a lot of sugar in it, then it kind of tastes okay. There are some people that really like it, but for the most part, it's kind of just part of the tradition, so you eat it. Another one is salmiakki. I think that's what it's, yes, salmiakki. And it's black licorice, but it's really salty. So you eat it and it's like your mouth explodes with salt. It's really weird. I really love how honest Finns are. They're very honest people. It takes a little while to become a friend with a Finn, but once you get them to open up a little bit, they become your best friend forever. It's so fun. I remember one time I was on a train and I was talking to this cute lady and her husband, and at first they weren't very interested in talking to me, but by the end of the train ride, like 2 hours later, we'd had a super long conversation. We'd made a lot of connections, and she gave me her email address and her phone number and her address so that I could come visit her and everything, just because she wanted to stay friends with me. I think that my favorite place in Finland would be Vaasa. It's just very beautiful there. It's right on the coast. I think that it's like a 2 or 3 hour boat ride to Sweden. So it's really fun because when we'd be talking to people on the street, every few people would speak Swedish. So it was just kind of cool to have that mix of people that spoke Finnish and Swedish, and then of course a lot of people spoke English. And it's just very beautiful there. It's just a peaceful little town. There are definitely a lot of foods that I would recommend when you're traveling through Finland. I mentioned some of them earlier, but pulla, which is a sweetbread, definitely you have to try, and salmon soup. But then there's also this thing that I love called riisipierakka. It translates to rice pie, but I think that kind of gives the wrong image. It's pretty much rice porridge, and then it's in this little rye shell, and it's really yummy. Oh, there's also this ice cream. It's called mud cake ice cream, which is really yummy, and then just mud cake in general is really good there. So I think there are a lot of fun foods to try. Yeah, the holidays in Finland, they were really fun. My favorite was definitely Christmas. Christmas there is a really big celebration. It's about 3 days long, or it is 3 days long. It's Christmas Eve, Christmas, and then Boxing Day. And it was really fun. That part of the year is just really amazing because it's so dark outside, and I feel like Christmas just brings so much light. It's really fun. On Christmas Eve, they'll have Santa Claus or joulupukki come to their house and bring the children their gifts. So it's a little different than in the United States. And they just spend a lot of time with family. They have a few different foods that are really yummy. They have rice porridge, which is it's a yummy Christmas tradition. And I think, if I remember right, they put an almond in the rice porridge, and then whoever finds the almond in their portion of the rice porridge has good luck for a year or something. I think that's what it was. Something else that's really cool around Christmas time is Finland is really close to their ancestors, which I really love. And they have a few different holidays, including around Christmas time, where they'll put candles on all of the graves. And it's really beautiful to go because it's, for example, in December it's really dark there. And so it's so beautiful to get to go and just see all of these lights everywhere on the graves. So when I was in Finland, we didn't have a smartphone with directions. We had to use maps. And so we got lost a lot. And almost every time we stopped a Finn on the street and asked for help with directions, they were more than happy to help us. And I just loved that no matter what they were doing, they just were happy to help. That was just kind of innate in their personalities, it seemed like, that want to help people and just make sure they were okay. The sauna in Finland is like a religious thing there. They do it every week. It's a very important part of their life. And they don't like things to get in the way of it. So I remember sometimes we'd knock on a door and they'd come out in their robe, a little grumpy because we'd disturbed their sauna night. And it was funny, it was cool to see how big of a part of their culture it was. I think it's really cool because it really gives them time to slow down, and I think that it's a really healthy part of life, just to have that time to be peaceful and take time to yourself and be with your family. I had a lot of funny language mistakes. I think the first one that came to my mind was we were talking to a few people, and my companion said, or my friend that I was with, she was asking, do you want to eat with us? But she didn't say with us. She said, do you want to eat us? And so that was funny. She was brand new to Finland, and so I felt bad because I kind of just started laughing and kept laughing for a long time, and then finally stopped. A really common language mistake that missionaries make, they mean to say, can we come meet with you? But they'll say, can we come kill you? Because it's very similar. It's saammeko tulla tapaamaan teitä or saammeko tulla tapaamaan teitä. I don't even know. I probably messed that up, but that's the difference. The Finnish language is really hard, but really fun. I remember I was so overwhelmed at first learning it, but I really came to love it. It's a really beautiful language. It's just so different from English. I think that's just what makes it so hard, is the grammar is completely different. And so it was just having to completely adjust your mind, to think in a completely new way. I think you can learn a lot about cultures, but through their language, and Finnish language is very direct. Like, you kind of just say things to the point. I guess you could kind of say it's kind of blunt in some ways, just really honest. And I think that reflects the Finnish people. They're just very honest and to the point. There are a lot of case endings in Finland, or in Finnish. I can't remember how many, but it was just really cool to see how you could change words and how a word could just take on a lot of different meanings, I guess. I think there are a lot of ways to slaughter Finnish. I wouldn't say that I'm very good at having a Finnish accent now, but I've definitely improved. I guess some things, like when I was first learning Finnish, something I would say, Minä haluan tulla sinun kanssasi kirkolle. Or saammeko tulla opettamaan teidät? I don't know. I don't really know what I would have done. No, mä oon todella kiitollinen suomalaisista ihmisistä. Se oli iso siunaus elämässäni, että voisin asua Suomessa 1,5 vuotta, koska mä opin todella paljon teiltä. Haluaisin kiittää teitä, suomalaisia ihmisiä, teidän ystävällisyydestään, meitä lähetyssaarnaajia kohtaan, koska me tarvitsemme teidän rakkautta. Ja mä tunsin siitä, kun olin Suomessa. Olen kiitollinen teidän esimerkistänne minulle, koska te olette niin ystävällisiä ja te olette ihania ihmisiä. Ja te autoitte minua tuntemaan todella paljon iloa, ja mun elämäni se on parempi, koska mä voisin asua Suomessa.
It was divine. I've tried to describe it to people, and it doesn't do it justice. It's so good. It's the perfect mixture of cream and tart and sweetness, just the perfect ending to literally any meal. I love Finland. I love being there. I love the people. I love the culture. I love the language, and I love the food. When I got there, I had no culture shock. When I came back, as soon as I stepped off the plane, the first thing I noticed was how loud it was. Everyone was so loud. Everyone was making so much noise. On the plane from London to Chicago, the flight attendants kept coming up and talking to me, and I was so confused what they needed. Why are they talking to me? They were just talking to me. The fish is incredible, and it's fresh, and it's so good. When I came back to the States and tried the fish here, it was such a disappointment because it's just not the same, and it's not like you can get it straight from Norway or even from their own coast. The fish is incredible, and they also have a lot of different dishes. They use salmon in a whole bunch of things. They have lohikeitto is a very popular soup. Most dishes, I think, have potatoes in them. One of my favorite things to eat was always Karjalan piirakka, or I guess culturally appropriately riisipiirakka. It's like a little rice pie. Rice mixed with cream on a little patty kind of thing that's turned up and then crimped, like this piece of dough, and it's so good. You put cheese on it and cucumbers normally, maybe meat if you want. It is so incredible. They're just these little packets of joy. So I would eat those a lot. Muesli I definitely eat occasionally, it's just kind of like a granola. And the juice concentrate, that was definitely a big surprise. Like here I'd always been used to juice concentrate being frozen, and that might have just been because I was uneducated. But they use liquid, it's like in a glass bottle normally. And pretty much every meal uses use them. And you can get all sorts of things. You can get elderberry juice and pear juice and strawberry and raspberry and like all of the kinds of juices that you can imagine. Lingonberry is very common because they really like berries too. Berries and mushrooms. All the kids are taught how to pick mushrooms, how to pick berries, and they know pretty much all the berries are actually totally fine to eat. Then we just go into the forest and you pick berries or mushrooms, and I was not brave enough to do it without a native Finn along. But pick them, make them into whatever. So use a lot of mushrooms and a lot of berries. My all-time favorite dessert, it's really simple. You just take rahka, which is like kind of like Greek yogurt. You mix in equal parts rahka and cream, and then put sugar in it, and if you're American, maybe too much sugar, and then berries, blueberries or raspberries. One of my favorite were buckthorn berries, turni. There's like these little orange berries, which I had never heard of before. Just mix them all together, and I would put honey on it instead of sugar, because I thought it worked better with the turni berries. It was divine. I've like tried to describe it to people, and it doesn't do it justice. It's so good. Karjalan paisti is so good. Like little chunks of beef, and then in a gravy, and then you put that on the Karjalan piirakka, the little pies we talked about earlier, and you just pour them on, and you can have potatoes along with it, or jam, lingonberry jam, or whatever kind of jam you want. I feel like it's a perfect depiction of Finland. It comes from all different parts of it, and it's mixed together into a wonderful symphony is the only way I can describe it.
I'm so sorry, you're so cold.
No, it's okay. I should have brought a jacket. So I was in my second to last area, Espoo, which is like part of Helsinki. Well, okay, it's not part of Helsinki, it's Espoo, but it's next to Helsinki, and some people think it's part of Helsinki. We were working with one of the members, and he had told us about one of his friends. It was a lady friend. She was from Lithuania. When she found out that I was American, she was like, "Oh, will you court me? And then I can go to America." And I was like, yeah, no. And I kind of just like moved on from the conversation, and I was hoping that it was either a joke or a slip because she wasn't a native English speaker or something like that. And then she started like grabbing my hand, and I was like, okay, like, no. And then she like gave me this side hug and clung on to my arm, and I was like, okay, well, apparently that was not a joke. Neither of my previous suppositions were correct. I kind of just laughed it off, and my companion was very confused because he hadn't seen the previous interaction, and so he was just like, play along with it, it's fine. But he clearly had not understood. So we were just like there, and she was like starting to get really touchy, and so then I was like, I have somewhere to be. And I walked out down the hallway, and I went and talked to the sisters, and I was like, okay, the sister missionaries, and I was like, okay, you guys are going to have to teach her because we are not going to teach her under any circumstances. And she came back to church a few times, but every time I saw her, I was a little wary because it was, very, very uncomfortable experience. But in hindsight, I hope she found some nice American to marry. Jos voisin sanoa ihan mitä vaan heille suomalaisille tai Suomessa asuville, sanoisin kiitos. Kiitos elämäni parhaista vuosista. Kiitos siitä, että sain viettää aikaa teidän kanssanne. Kiitos siitä, että sain oppia teistä. Kiitos siitä, että te autoitte minua. Te vahvistitte minua ja te opetitte minulle, mitä minun tarvitsi tietää juuri silloin. Minä olen ikuisesti kiitollinen siitä tilaisuudesta, joka minulla oli. Minä toivon, että te kaikki tiedätte, kuinka ihanassa maassa te asutte ja siitä, kuinka paljon teitä on siunattu ja kuinka paljon te olette minua siunanneet. Te olette minua siunanneet. Se oli ihmeellinen kokemus. Sain asua siellä ja mä en voisi koskaan unohtaa sitä teidän tähtenne.
One thing I love about the Finns is how much they acknowledge the effort you've put into learning their language and how much they give you sympathy, because almost every single time, like especially new Finnish missionaries, when they're speaking their broken American accent Finnish, they're just like, terve, minä olen ollut Suomea kuukauden nyt, ja mitä kuuluu? Something like that, and they'd be like, oh, hyvä. Älä huoli, suomi on vaikea kieli, se on vaikea kieli. Be like, don't worry, Finnish is a hard language, it's a hard language. And quite often they'll go into English, and they think they're being nice, but in reality I think it's kind of condescending. It's like, your Finnish isn't good enough, so I have to switch into English to be at your level. But I can also understand the struggle of talking to someone who is just absolutely slaughtering your own language. You're like, here, I'll help you out and speak English. I just remember going in the posti to pick up a package and just wanting to be like, hey, mulla on paketti, onko se jo täällä? Something like that. And they'll just be like, yeah, what's your name? And I'll be like, my name's Elder Coke. Thanks. And then it's just like, dang it, my Finnish didn't pass the test. It didn't pass the fluency test. I think that people in Finland, rightfully so as well, they respect their personal space, their privacy, and they reserve the right to not talk to you or acknowledge you if they don't know you and you want to contact them on the street. One thing that was very common, encountered about every day, my companions and I would call it the Finnish hand or the Finnish wave. It's basically when you're walking down the street, there's someone coming towards you, most likely a Finn, most likely of the older generation. You'll go to do some friendly conversation, a little small talk. So you're like, hey, how are you doing today, sir? Or hey, it's a beautiful day today. I love your dog. Something like that. And they'll just give you the Finnish hand. They'll be like, you walking? They'll be like, and they just put their head down, give you the hand, and they just keep walking. And every time that happened, I just look at my companion and be like, they hit us with a Finnish hand. And then we just keep on going and talk to the next person. And that was just very common and very normal. And I totally respect that. Me, having been in Finland for a long time, I started to even feel that way myself of when I'm on the bus, I just want to chill. When I'm on the train, I just want to do my thing. I want to eat my own rye bread sandwich to myself and not have anybody come to me and mess with that. However, Finns, once you get to know them, once you become friends, their acquaintances, they really do become lifelong friends. Something that really surprised me was to find out that there are different discourse particles. Finns will say their own little ensemble of these filler words, and I had no idea what any of them were. Some of them sound like actual words, and some of them do have other meanings. For example, one word that you learn very early on is the word for true, which is tosi. And if you put it into the partitive, which is the case in which it is often used, then it'll sound like totta. When I heard Finns very frequently in their speech saying, ja noin niin, siis me mentiin siihen paikkaan ja sitten siellä noin niin, I was like, what is he saying? Is he just like true, and then I went over there and true. I was so confused. I'm like, why is this guy saying true over and over again? Like, what's his deal? Is he like obsessed with truth? Like, what is the truth? What is he trying to find? I had no idea. One time this guy, he would be like, he had this weird accent. I thought he was saying the word for daughter over and over again. Like, tytär. It's like, tytär noin niin, something like that. I'm like, does this guy have a daughter? I almost asked the guy, like, so how's your daughter? And my companion's like, wait, he doesn't have a daughter. I'm like, he's been talking about his daughter this whole time. He's like, no. I'd been like in country 5 weeks. I didn't know about these filler words. So apparently they exist, and that caught me completely by surprise. Just another part of why I loved learning so many new things in the country. The biggest culture shock when I came to Finland was dealing with the seasons and the weather, to be frank. It's a dark place, and when late fall, early winter hits, when it's not quite the winter wonderland, but it's still very cold and very dark, that'll get you. They call November marrasku, death month, and rightly so. Marrasku is brutal. It's kind of depressing, to be frank, when the sun's going down super early and rising really late. it's always cloudy, and the leaves are already starting to fall off the tree, so it isn't quite gorgeous anymore or pretty. And you don't have that winter wonderland. Instead, the ground's just freezing, everyone's slipping. I've slipped so many times in my mission. That was kind of hard to get used to. And honestly, I think that's one of the main things holding me back from the idea of just straight up migrating to Finland and assimilating into that community, is because I'm like, man, I love Finland. I love the people. I love the language. I love the culture. But man, I like wish it was like always like August weather in Finland, or it was always like January weather. But once it comes to that late fall, it's just absolutely brutal. I used to serve in a city called Rauma. So did my missionary friend who's here with me. And we both know of a very famous man. His name, I'll give him an alias. We'll call him Mikko. And Mikko, we had this symbiotic relationship with him. We would meet with him and we would practice English with him because he wanted us to learn English and he loved practicing it. And he would help us polish up with our Finnish. Mikko is a very fun and interesting man. So in this scenario, I have been in Finland for about 10 months or so. So I'm feeling a little bit more confident about my ability to speak Finnish, but of course I need a lot of practice. However, I am currently training another missionary who's been in the country for only a couple of weeks, so he did not know much Finnish. So Mikko is trying to help us polish up our Finnish. So I will say it's completely innocent humor, but it is kind of inappropriate. So I'll give you a little bit of a warning ahead of time to protect your virgin ears if you want to skip ahead and not listen to this. But we were practicing some vocabulary and a phrase with Mikko. And my companion, who's very young, of course, doesn't speak much Finnish, he's trying to understand the difference between thick and thin. The word for thick in Finnish is paksu. The word for thin is ohut. So we're just walking around in the parking lot, just having casual conversation, and Mikko explains the concept of paksu and what that means, just thick. And my companion, he's just trying to joke around and he's just trying to practice Finnish. He wants to say like, oh, I'm thick, just to be funny. So he tries to say, olen paksu. Unfortunately, that is not what he said. He did not say olen paksu. Instead, he's just walking there, he's just sitting and he says, olen paska. And that word is the equivalent to the English, the S word, S-H-I-T. So he just stands there and says, It's like I'm crap, just to keep it a little bit of euphemism there. And Mikko and I, we just bust up dying because of what he just said right there. And Mikko, he's going up to him and he's like, he's speaking English again. He's like, did you know what you just said? You just said that I am crap. you are crap. And my companion, he's just sitting there like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. And I'm like, dude, that happens to everybody. Like, it's okay. One thing I really love about Finland, something that really surprised me, and I'm sure will surprise a lot of other people, Finland is a surprisingly, it's a very multicultural community, especially if you're serving in some of the more bigger cities. Cities like Helsinki especially, a lot of college cities, places like Oulu, Jyväskylä, places like that, where you'll find just people from all over the world. And it's really surprising. As I was researching about Finland before I came on my mission, it seemed like the demographic was largely composed of mostly just Finns and Swedish Finns, like 95%, 90-something% were just native populace. But as I came into the country, and I see people from the Middle East, people from Africa, people from all across Europe doing exchange programs in Finland, studying at their universities, it was incredible to be able to have a conversation with somebody and you have this circle of people, maybe 4 people talking to each other. And there are 4 different continents represented in that circle. Me from North America, my companion from Sweden, from Europe, talking to someone from Algeria in Africa, with someone accompanying him from Brazil in South America. I'm just standing there like, this is absolutely incredible. This is a phenomenal opportunity just to be here and to experience that. And I had no idea a country like Finland had those kind of opportunities available. That was something I was super grateful for, and I absolutely loved meeting people of different cultures and learning about them. That being said, I absolutely love the Finnish culture, and being able to have the combination of diving deep, learning all about the Finnish language and culture, really loving the people and getting to know and understand how they behave, their social norms, and how that differs to what I'm used to growing up in the United States and even a little bit in Germany. It was absolutely incredible, and something that I would truly love to go back and continue to experience living there for myself a little bit longer, maybe not as a missionary so I don't have to break some of those social norms and talk to people on buses, because I know none of the Finns want someone to approach them on a bus and say, hey, how do you feel about Jesus? I'd be like, dude, I'm on a bus and my seat is full because it's me and no one else. That means the seat's full. That's just the culture there. It's kind of crazy. So that was something that I didn't expect, but I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that aspect of Finland. So this is my what we call a V-book or a vieraskirja. Here's just a couple pages from it, and it's just a little record of how Finnish missionaries would write in each other's V-books and share the experiences that we had, put in a bunch of pictures. And I wanted to share one particular picture of something that I absolutely love about Finnish culture, and it's this picture right here. So this picture is of me, my companion, and one of the youth in Rauma. And this is a sport called sähly, or salibändi. And this is an absolutely amazing sport. And I'm so disappointed we don't have it in the United States, because it's so good. And it's so good for me, because guess what? I'm really bad at ice skating. But I'm better at running on like a surface of ground that is reliable, like a gym or something. So I love sähly because I can play hockey and follow the general rules and concepts, but instead it's in a gym. You have these little sählymailat, and then the goal, and it's kind of like soccer or football, and you just have a hockey stick and the goal, and it's so good. So I love sähly. And that became a very important part of my mission, was just spending time with friends that I meet on the street, members of the church, just getting together and playing some sähly, having a good time. So that's one part of Finnish culture I truly love and miss, and I hope it will spread here to the United States because it is amazing. A message to the people of Finland. I want to do it in your own native language, from my heart, and to do my best at demonstrating a piece of my feelings and a little bit of my experience of living in your country. Mä haluaisin sanoa, että minun aikani Suomeni oli todella rakas minulle. Olen niin kiitollinen kaikista kokemuksistani, jotka mä sain siellä. Ja mä haluaisin palata Suomeen ja saada uusia kokemuksia ja luoda uusia suhteita ihmisiin niin, että mä voisin jatkaa käyttää sitä, mitä mä oon oppinut. Ja myös mä haluaisin antaa takaisin Suomelle, koska se on auttanut minua todella paljon minun omassa edistymisessäni. Niin mä haluaisin auttaa sitä yhteisöä olemalla osa sitä. Ja toivottavasti, kun tämä koronavirus hätätilanne on jo mennyt ohi, mä voisin mennä takaisin Suomeen, jatkaa sitä kieltä oppia ja toivottavasti opiskella yliopistossa tai tehdä työtä sillä, mutta mä haluaisin antaa takaisin Suomelle, koska se on ollut hyvin arvokas. Minun kokemuksiani siellä on ollut hyvin arvokkaita, ja kiitoksia kaikille suomalaisille. Te olette mahtavia ihmisiä, te olette rohkeita, te olette suoria ihmisiä, ja niitä asioita varten minä olen kiitollinen. I recognize that I've already made grammar mistakes in that, but sometimes you just gotta accept what you say and just keep on going, because if I were to be that critical of my language, I would probably say like all of my sentences over again and over again, and that's why I prefer to write Finnish, where I can be like, I can look at something for like 15 seconds and be like, no, that's not quite right, and then make a little adjustment there. I absolutely love Finland. I love the people there. I'm so grateful for the time that I was able to spend there. I hope to spend a lot more someday soon in the future.